Chapter 281, Chapter 279. He was insane. Absolutely insane. Does that guy even know the value of the fruit he's talking about? Contrary to the shock the market people received, Suho was actually waiting for this moment. This is perfect. I've made quite a bit of money, so I was about to move on to the next stage. Rather, he was grateful for Hustl's sudden appearance. His plan to rake in as much currency used in the market as possible was quite successful. As expected, the response was even more explosive when he introduced competition. Besides, he still had a lot of bread left. So now it's time to sweep up other things. And Hustle, the most famous reaper in the city, who appeared just in time, had plenty of fruits. It was much easier and simpler than mingling with people and participating in the auction. In the end, Hustle silently took out the fruits of Alfheim from her pocket and held them out to Suho at his request. And there were 6 of them. Suho grinned as he accepted what she offered. "Oh my, thank you, valued customer. Choose anything you like. You can have up to 3 strawberry cakes for 6 fruits." Swish. Hustle strode towards the shelves where the cakes were displayed as soon as Suho gave her permission. But although he called them cakes, they were all just slices. Unfortunately, Suho had swept up all the leftovers the bakery that was closing last night had. But Hustle began to carefully choose the pieces with the most vibrant and beautiful strawberries. Everyone in the market was shocked at the sight. Profiteering, tyranny, and Hustle's behavior, silently accepting that absurd demand, was incomprehensible. The fruits of Alfheim were the most precious item in this city. No matter how many the reapers had, they wouldn't exchange them for just a few pieces of bread. But Hustle, not caring about people's reactions, carefully chose 3 pieces of strawberry cream cake that she liked the most and put them in the plastic bag Suho handed her. And she left the market as silently as she came. Once Hustle left, a sigh of relief swept through the market a beat later. It felt like a typhoon had passed. It was a testament to how many individuals had their necks sliced by Hustle's scythe. Anyway, people who were relieved that Hustle had left once again jumped into the competition for Suho's bread. But Hustle's appearance, which seemed like it would end as a minor event, had already changed quite a few things. Suho, watching her retreating figure for a moment, smirked and changed the auction rules once again. "Now I'll change the auction rules a little. For those who have run out of money, you can now participate in the auction with the fruits of Alfheim." Crazy. Who would use fruits? Of course, I don't know when the price will go up again. Pause. Suho's last words were decisive. At that moment, people realized. As long as there was bread left in Beru baguette, and as that resource decreased, the competition would only become fiercer. Extreme scarcity. But now, it wasn't just a price war. The unit of trade itself had changed, because of Hustle's appearance. In the end, Suho's bakery not only emptied the pockets of the market merchants, but also made them take out their precious fruits. I dedicate all this glory to Hustle. And Suho, Beru, yes, my liege, asked Beru in a low voice, watching the direction Hustle disappeared. Was she S-rank? Indeed, but more importantly, however, what Beru noticed wasn't the fact that Hustle was an S-rank villain, but the giant scythe she was carrying on her shoulder. I felt the energy of the outer gods from that scythe. Circa also nodded in agreement. I saw it too. That was definitely a weapon made with a star piece, the same as the ones embedded in the High Elf's eyes. Was she really an enforcer? He needed to look into this. Beru, follow her. See what she's up to. Yes. Beru immediately disappeared at Suho's command. And while we're at it, Suho also gave separate orders to the other soldiers hiding in his shadow, to hide in the shadows of all the villains gathered in this market. And just like that, under the vast shadow of Alfheim, Suho's own shadow began to spread throughout the Paradise City without anyone knowing. And a while later, the executives of the Free Market Alliance finally gathered in one place. It was none other than the bank manager who summoned them. "Is everyone here?" The bank manager clicked his tongue as he looked at the unusually gloomy faces of the fruit merchants. They were truly pathetic. Those who were always so confident and full of themselves had become like this overnight. Beru baguette. Flinch. All the executives flinched at that single phrase. Seeing their reactions, the bank manager sighed and said, "Is this even possible? for the city's economy to be shaken by just one bakery? No matter how rare a bakery was in this land, it was absurd for the city-scale economy to be jeopardized by just this. But it actually happened, because he pulled out another container later. That's right. It turned out that the newbie had not one, but two bakeries. After the market merchant spent a considerable amount to buy the bread from the first container he took out, he suddenly summoned the second container. Everyone was shocked. I don't know what kind of skill that is. Should they call him a container summoner? But the problem at hand wasn't his title nor skill. That newbie swept up too much money in just one day, and he disappeared without spending a single penny. Yes, that was the issue. There was no problem with someone earning a lot of money. That was the purpose of the market in the first place. But if he only earned money and didn't spend it, holding on to it, it became a big problem. The economy of this city was practically maintained by debt, not money. No matter how much the debtors wanted to repay their debts, if there was no money itself, only the interest would continue to increase. And no one wanted the result of the debtors going bankrupt and exploding with their debts unpaid. Even the bank didn't want that. If all the debtors went bankrupt, the bank would also collapse. At this rate, within a few days, the city's currency circulation will be severely contracted, causing major disruptions in transactions. As you all know, the amount of currency circulating in our city is very limited, and if that much money is tied up in one place, there won't be enough for other people's transactions, inevitably shrinking the market. Everyone nodded at the bank manager's lengthy speech. This city, with its small market size, was inevitably sensitive to such changes. And if transactions decrease due to lack of currency, prices will also. Mr. Park, the fruit merchant, who couldn't stand the seemingly endless lecture, finally spoke up. Bank manager, do we really need to worry about that now? Wouldn't that newbie eventually spend the money if we wait a little? And how long will that be? The bank manager glared at him with sharp eyes and retorted, first and foremost, when would that newbie alone spend all that money? No, does he even need anything? He even earned a lot of fruits at the end. What else would he need here? That's right. Actually, they all knew. What people needed to live was food, clothing, and shelter. Here, clothing meant armor. Not clothes to adorn, but armor to protect oneself. And realistically, there was no way to solve this because of the unique circumstances of North Korea. They had to procure it themselves. They had to fix the armor they were wearing before coming to North Korea. Next was food. This usually meant magical beast meat or fruits, and the fruits of Alfheim. That was why things were so complicated today, because of the sudden appearance of the bakery. And the last one was shelter, lodging. The citizens of this city didn't have the concept of owning a house. Everything was monthly rent. No, to be precise, it was daily rent. Since they didn't know when they would die, all the lodgings in the city charged their guests lie. How about telling people to charge him a higher price for lodging? Mr. Choi offered a good suggestion. But that was the biggest problem. The bank manager's gaze swept over the executives of the alliance and asked sharply, "That's a good idea. So does anyone know where that guy is now? Which lodging is he staying at? Didn't you say you lost track of him as soon as he left the market after selling all the bread?" That's right. He disappeared last evening, and he disappeared again tonight. He was truly elusive, a real ghost of a guy. Could it be related to that container skill? Maybe he's hiding somewhere and sleeping in that container that was filled with bread. The bank manager clicked his tongue in annoyance at someone's uncertain mutter. Then you should at least find that container. It would be a jackpot for you if you run into him outside the market. The Hunter Guild is already searching the entire city. We've also put out a separate request to the skilled ones. The bank manager's words hit the nail on the head. Indeed, that newbie was practically a walking treasure chest. Today, that guy's container would be filled with shiny coins instead of all that bread. And since the use of force was allowed outside the market, whoever found and killed him first would become the owner of that vast fortune. Of course, the problem was what would happen next. They all knew what would follow. Whoever caught him first would eventually be caught and killed by someone else. Then the money would go to someone new, and that person would also be caught and killed by someone else. An endless massacre would unfold in the city. This was literally a city of villains. In the end, the money would either end up in the hands of the strongest villain or the strongest faction, and only then would the incident be over. And all those outcomes were the worst for the city. No, it was a catastrophe. It doesn't matter who that newbie is caught and killed by anymore. The city's balance has already begun to crumble. A sigh escaped his lips. The most absurd thing in all this was that this whole thing started with an incident caused by just one person in a single day. As the bank manager who had to maintain the balance of the city, he couldn't help but sigh. In the end, the best way is to make the money he has flow back into the market. We have to make him spend that money somehow, whether through the bank or other means. Yes, this was the best the bank manager could come up with. First of all, none of us gathered here have proper knowledge or banking experience. We just created this system to survive. The economic system we built is standing on a precarious balance that could collapse at any moment. That's right. None of them had anticipated a situation like this. No. Actually, they all already knew that no matter how much they boasted about manipulating the city's market economy, their true nature would be revealed when something like this actually happened. No matter how much they acted high and mighty, they were just ordinary murderers who were chased and chased by the association and eventually fled to North Korea. Rather than discussing difficult market logic or balance, they were people who were most comfortable just catching and killing someone. So what are we going to do? Mr. Choi, unable to bear it any longer, finally spoke up. What you're saying, bank manager, is to find that guy and make him spend money, right? Even if it means using some drastic measures. Drastic measures. That's a very good idea. As if waiting for those words, the bank manager's eyes gleamed like a snake's. And he shrugged with a hypocritical expression as he glanced at the other executives of the alliance. I never imagined something like this, but would it really be okay? Only this time, of course. The executives of the alliance inwardly gritted their teeth at his shameless expression. This snake-like bastard. He was waiting for us to say it first. The bank and the free market alliance never crossed the line they drew. That was the rule, the secret to how this city precariously maintained its balance. But to make an exception this time, regardless of the city's crisis or whatever, was practically ignoring the existence of the alliance. As the atmosphere ripened to his liking, the bank manager clasped his hands and said with a satisfied smile, "All right, then according to your opinions." It was then the door suddenly burst open and a debtor rushed in. "Bank manager, it's terrible." What's going on?" The bank manager turned his head with an annoyed expression, and the debtor shouted urgently, "Beru, that newbie. Don't tell me, you found him?" Everyone at the table was startled and jumped to their feet, but the debtor's answer was absurd. We found him, but he came on his own." "What? Where?" "To the bank. He came to buy fruits." "What? Fruits?" The bank manager's expression hardened at those words. "Don't tell me that guy." The debtor, intimidated by the bank manager's fierce gaze, replied nervously, "Yes, he asked how many fruits he could buy with the money he has." "Ah, I see. A madman." The bank manager became certain at that moment. "Beru, that guy was definitely a madman. Stop him. Go and stop him now." The bakery villain who appeared in the market was now targeting the fruits stored in the bank. Chapter 282, Chapter 280. His breath caught in his throat. The bank manager ran and ran. He sprinted through the city at a breakneck pace, towards the bank where Suho appeared. Thud, crack, bang, bang. His legs, taut beyond reason, kicked off the ground, cutting through the wind. The ground he stepped on caved in. All the citizens of this city were awakened. The bank manager was also a B-rank villain, but it was the first time since that day that he ran this fast. The moment he heard that Suho appeared at the bank, the hair on his body stood on end like that day. "I have to stop that bastard." He was impatient. Were the employees handling things calmly? He was worried. He hadn't trained them for a situation like this. He felt uneasy relying solely on the employees' discretion. Should I just ignore the rules and kill him with a joint attack? Crunch. As killing intent surged, A red aura spread through his body along his bulging veins. In any case, the bank manager was also a villain. Rather than racking his brains, it was much easier to just kill someone and be done with it. And he arrived. Bang! The bank manager, who arrived at the bank in an instant, kicked the door open and entered. Be bank manager. An employee's eyes widened as he saw the bank manager, who was unusually disheveled. His face was pale. What? What happened? The bank manager, catching his breath, quickly surveyed the office. A chaotic atmosphere. A desolate air lingered as if a storm had just passed. And at the center of it, money. The bank manager's eyes widened. A tremendous amount of money. A massive pile of coins was stacked before the employees, flaunting an overwhelming presence. The money they were discussing with the Alliance executives just moments ago had been recovered to the bank on its own. But instead of rejoicing, the bank manager hurriedly passed by the pile and checked the most important fruit warehouse first. It was wide open. These fucking bastards. Confirming that the warehouse was empty, he gritted his teeth and looked back. Whoosh! In an instant, his arm stretched forward and grabbed an employee's neck at terrifying speed. It was the staff member closest to the money. Gasp! The deputy manager, whose neck was caught in the bank manager's hand, choked and desperately struggled with his feet, and the arm that was easily lifting him. Surprisingly, instead of human muscles, numerous vines were intertwined and wriggling like tentacles, like the branches of Alfheim. Speak. The bank manager spoke in a chilling voice to the terrified employees. Tell me what happened here immediately. Madness flickered in his bloodshot eyes. A little while ago, at the sudden appearance of Suho, who walked into the bank, all the employees and the citizens who visited for requests and debts were greatly agitated. Is that? Could it be? Murmurs sounded, because Suho came with a huge bundle slung over his shoulder. Receiving all those gazes, he walked towards the bank counter. People unconsciously stepped back and cleared the way for him. Thanks to what happened at the market this morning, there was no one in this city who didn't know about Suho. Even those who weren't at the market knew the pseudonym Beru, even if they didn't know his face. And there was no one here who couldn't recognize that the guy who appeared at the bank with such a huge bundle was the main character of that rumor. In this land, a clueless villain couldn't survive. Russell. As Suho opened the bundle he was carrying on his shoulder before the bank employee, everyone's jaws dropped at the brilliant light of the coins inside. Crazy. No way. No way. Is that all the money he earned in just one day? It was truly overwhelming. For any citizen of this city, greed should have been the first thing that came to mind when they saw someone's money. But the amount Suho took out was so astonishing that it surpassed even greed. I'm here to buy fruits. That. The bank employee was flustered by Suho's straightforward request and the sudden dazzling light before his eyes. Then the deputy manager, who was behind him, quickly pushed him aside and skillfully responded to Suho. Hello, customer. If it isn't Mr. Beru, who came to the city last night, you said you want to buy fruits. Ah, yes. How many fruits of Alfheim can I buy with this much money? Are you sure? This much, it will be difficult to store the fruits if you buy them all. It's fine. Is it really necessary to buy so many fruits at once? It will be inconvenient to store them. Why don't you deposit this money in the bank and receive fruits only when you need them? I need them now. The deputy manager couldn't say anything at Suho's firm will. He glanced down and estimated the amount of coins gleaming before his eyes. With this money? Gulp. Actually, anyone could tell, not just the employee. No, everyone in the bank knew for sure. With that much, he can buy all the fruits in the bank and still have some left. Did he come to rob the bank? This was no different from a bank robbery. But this bank robber was trying to rob the bank's warehouse fair and square with a massive amount of money as his weapon instead of guns and knives. Ahem, ahem. The bank employee, responding to Suho under everyone's gaze, coughed and desperately racked his brain. Damn it, for the bank manager to be away at a time like this. And it had to be because he went to meet the Alliance executives to solve the problem of this Beru who appeared before them. For now, let's stall. The bank manager will be back soon. He desperately maintained a relaxed expression and continued the conversation. Haha, Mr. Beru, you're truly amazing. I heard rumors that you made a lot of money at the market today, and as the rumors say, fruits. Ah, yes, of course I'll give them to you, but fruits. This was bad. Nothing worked. No matter what he said, Suho just calmly pointed at the price list of the fruit on the wall and repeated his purpose for coming here. Bring them all. I have plenty of money. The bank needs this money too, doesn't it? The deputy manager closed his eyes tightly at those last words. He knows everything. This guy wasn't just acting on a whim. He came here knowing their situation, and all the villains, no, the hunters, who visited the bank were watching their conversation with interest. The bewildered look in their eyes gradually disappeared, and greed began to creep in. With that much money, we can get a good share. Gulp, their mouths watered, just like when they saw Beru baguette at the market. Just as the use of force was prohibited in the free market, it was the same in the bank. But from the moment they stepped out of the bank's door, it was a lawless zone. No matter what kind of transaction that Beru guy made here, he would become their target the moment he stepped outside. Now that they had seen that money with their own eyes, there were no surprises. First, we'll all attack and kill him. And then we'll split the money. A strong desire was burning in the eyes of the hunters as they exchanged glances, and the deputy manager could clearly see their thoughts. If I refuse this money here, it will go to those guys the moment he steps outside. And that could lead to the collapse of not just the bank, but paradise itself. But handing over all the fruits in the warehouse to this crazy guy named Beru would also lead to the same ending. It was truly a dilemma. There's no choice. I'll use my discretion. He finally made up his mind. Rip. The deputy manager, who was dealing with Suho, suddenly stepped to the side and tore off the price list of the fruits that was attached to the wall. While everyone was puzzled, the deputy manager answered Suho with a firm expression. I'm very sorry, but the price of the fruit has just gone up. Suddenly, Suho tilted his head and looked at him. Yes, it has, so please understand. So how much is it? 10 times the market price. At his shocking déclat on, the eyes of the other villains in the bank widened, even more so than when Suho appeared. What? Did you hear what that bastard just said? What the hell is that crazy guy talking about? Their blatant killing intent poured out towards the deputy manager, but his expression didn't waver as he stared at Suho. Mr. Beru, you may not know this yet, but in this city, we, the bank, manage the money and fruits. We have the authority to change the price of the fruit as we see fit for the safety of the citizens and the balance of the city. Yes, a rule was a rule. He wasn't wrong. The price of the fruit did change frequently, and it was the bank that set the price. But suddenly raising the price tenfold like this crossed the line. Everyone in the city needed the fruit. But what if I do this? The deputy manager spoke with determination. His plan was to reverse what Suho did at the market today. In short, it was abuse of power. In that sense, we have decided to sell the fruit at 10 times the market price, only to you, Mr. Beru, from now on. Suho's brow furrowed, and of course, other citizens can still purchase at the original price. Oh, now things were different. The villains' lips curled up simultaneously. All their dissatisfaction disappeared in an instant. As public opinion changed, the deputy manager smiled triumphantly and drove the wedge further. I, the deputy manager, will take full responsibility for this. However, I'm only concerned for your safety, Mr. Beru. This is a city of villains. It's too dangerous to carry this much money without depositing it in the bank. He grinned. Good. Even the justification was perfect. Now, what are you going to do? He waited for Suho's answer with a meaningful smile. The stage was perfectly set. There were now only 2 options left for this arrogant newbie. Buy the fruit at 10 times the price and leave all this money at the bank. Or try to save some money and take it outside, only to be killed by those hungry hunters. Brilliant. His own genius in handling the situation impressed the deputy manager. But why? Why was that guy smiling? I see. All right. Even after suffering such biased and absurd price manipulation, Suho remained calm. He nodded obediently, without any sign of frustration or discomfort. What? Is he bluffing? But they soon realized that it wasn't a bluff. Suho didn't argue with the bank employee's decision at all and just turned his gaze behind him, and he spoke to all the villains who were staring at him. You all heard, right? That the fruit is 10 times more expensive only for me, and the price remains the same for you. Heh. Sneers could be heard from everywhere. Was there anyone here who didn't hear that? However, the problem was what came next. Suho chuckled and announced to all the villains in the bank who were watching him, "From now on, I'll buy any fruit you bring me at twice the market price." What? The bank employee's triumphant smile faltered. The villains who heard that also doubted their ears. What is that guy saying? Suho drove the wedge further. Whatever. Since I have a lot of money, let's make it 5 times. Wait, what's this? The deputy manager didn't even have time to panic. Now, begin. As soon as Suho finished speaking, all the villains in the bank rushed towards the bank employees. Fruits. I'll buy fruits. Me first. All miscellaneous thoughts disappeared from their minds. If they could just buy fruits, the money they had would be multiplied by 5. How could they resist? You know this is only until I run out of money, right? As Suho added fuel to the fire, it became a first-come, first-served battle. Give it to me. Now, give me the fruits. Wait, just a moment, everyone. Please calm down. This was practically a revolt. The rioters with money began to grab the bank employees by the collar and pester them, only to resell the fruits to Suho. Chapter 283, Chapter 281. It was an obvious choice. I'll buy fruits. Give me the fruits now. Fruits. Even if they killed Beru outside the bank and stole all the coins, it was clear that those who remained would fight over the coins again, and it was virtually impossible to avoid getting hurt in that process. In other words, they would eventually have to come back to the bank, bleeding, to buy fruits. Then what would be left? Only the bank would benefit. Compared to that, what about the other option? To get that huge pile of coins gleaming before their eyes? All they had to do was buy the fruit at the regular price and resell it at 5 times the value. How could they resist? Wah! Fruits! Give me the fruits! They were no different from rioters. Madness could be felt from the villains who were scrambling to pressure the bank employees into selling them fruits. The citizens of this city were already brainwashed by debt and coins. They wouldn't hesitate to kill to pay off their debts or to get coins. Just killing? First and foremost, this was a city of villains, especially the debt-ridden hunters wearing bomb chokers. They blatantly threatened the bank employees with killing intent, grabbing them by the collar. What are you doing? Hurry up and bring them out. What's the problem with me buying fruits from the bank with my own money? How much more loan can I get? Yes, let's get some loans while we're at it. Give them to me, now. They didn't hesitate to buy fruits, even by taking out loans. If they resold it immediately, the money would be multiplied by 5, so what was the problem? With such a guaranteed investment, how many people would refuse a loan? Wait, just a moment. The bank employees couldn't help but panic at their explosive momentum. But there was no other way. Of course, they could refuse the transaction under the pretense of maintaining the city's balance, but if they restricted the purchase of the essential fruit for survival in this apocalypse, all the villains in the city might riot. If it was just Beru alone, it would be fine, but if all the villains in the city rose up, there was no way for the bank to subdue them. That crazy bastard! The deputy manager, with a defeated look, looked blankly at Beru, who was leisurely watching this chaotic scene beyond the crowd. And, crack! The bank manager, after hearing the whole story, snapped his employee's neck and killed him. The deputy manager died without even screaming, and then something amazing happened. Whoosh! The bank manager's root, which was made of hard bark and wriggling vines instead of an arm, began to suck the red energy from the dead deputy manager's body. Thud! The corpse, devoid of life like a withered tree, rolled powerlessly on the floor. The expression on the bank manager's face as he stomped on the remaining shell of the corpse with his foot was, surprisingly, satisfaction. Ugh, you little shit, you ate a lot. Did you steal fruits behind my back? Hiccup. Someone hiccuped. The faces of the employees, who had a history of secretly stealing fruits from the warehouse, turned pale at the bank manager's words. As far as they knew, the bank manager's awakening rank was only B rank. But at the same time, he was the bank manager who ate the most fruits of Alfheim in this city. They didn't know what would happen or how strong they would become if they ate that many fruits. Alfheim itself was an unknown existence. They couldn't understand what effect it had on the body until they tried it themselves. But there was one thing. They knew that the bank manager was most wary of anyone eating more fruits than him. Russell, his arm, which had turned into vines, returned to its original state. The bank manager nonchalantly stroked his hand, which had returned to its normal skin color, and asked the employees, who were trembling in fear, "So, where is he?" He disappeared again, suddenly, as soon as he stepped out of the bank. Then what about the others who were here? They all resold the fruits to him and scattered. Well, that's understandable. They would have made a lot of money thanks to him, so they'll probably hide and be wary of each other for a while. Ha! This is troublesome. The bank manager, who regained his composure after venting his anger and feeling a sense of fullness, organized his thoughts for a moment. First, we need to refill the empty warehouse. If rumors spread that the bank doesn't have any fruits, the debtors will attack us. Gulp. The employees' expressions became determined. The reason why the bank could exist as a bank in this lawless wasteland was thanks to the fruit. No matter how much the debtors were struggling with debt, no matter how much they were threatened with death every day with bomb collars around their necks and treated like slaves, the reason why they could never challenge the bank's authority was that the bank stored the fruits. With all the fruits that healed all wounds gathered in this place, what madman would try to rob the bank just to earn some money? While everyone else could be easily killed, the bank employees who possessed the fruits were practically holding countless spare lives in the warehouse. But the situation was completely different now. The fruits are gone. But instead, there's a mountain of money. A bank without fruits, only money. Truly the worst. Was there a better situation to provoke the debtors? Everyone, be prepared for a raid. The debtors might attack if the rumors spread. All the bank employees, who had been terrified, now had determined expressions. He wasn't joking. They had just experienced the momentum of the rioters who screamed for fruits, but that was nothing. Their goal then was to earn money, not to repay their debts. But how many debtors had they squeezed dry with the bait of debt? If all of them in this city found out about this situation, they would turn into bank robbers in an instant, and spread false rumors in the city as soon as possible that the bank actually has another fruit warehouse. Yes, we have to buy time to refill the warehouse with fruits. The employees began to move busily at the bank manager's orders, and summon the reapers as secretly as possible. Tell them we'll double the reward for fruit harvesting for a few days. We have enough money thanks to that damned bastard. I understand. If you understand, move quickly. Yes. No, wait. The bank manager suddenly turned his head towards the window, feeling an ominous sensation. Thud, thud, thud. He could feel a faint vibration from under his feet. Don't tell me already? Something was ominous. His expression hardened. No, that couldn't be. This was way too fast. Considering the size of this city, there was no way rumors could have already spread to the debtors. Even if the rumors spread, it's impossible for everyone to hear about it already. It's still too early for them to gather and attack. But ominous premonitions were always right. Damn it, everyone, stop what you're doing and grab your weapons. The bank employees were startled and hurriedly grabbed their weapons at the bank manager's sudden shout. And then they also saw what he was looking at. Thud, 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 far away, outside the window. Countless debtors were swarming towards them, with bomb chokers around their necks. How already? This was absurd. Even if there were many hunters who earned 5 times their money and returned here, this was way too fast. But they couldn't ever imagine that under the feet of the debtors who were rushing towards the bank with weapons, there were shadows spreading rumors in real time. Hey, did you hear? The bank ran out of fruits. Ah, no way. No, it's true. That bakery villain who appeared in the market earlier bought all the fruits from the bank. What, really? Then the bank right now doesn't have any fruits. What? Then isn't this our chance? What are you waiting for? I heard others already left saying it's a chance to get revenge on those bank bastards. How long do we have to live as their slaves? Yes, that's right. We escaped to North Korea. Do we have to become slaves to capitalism here too? The identity of those voices was the numerous shadow soldiers that Suho planted in the shadows of the people gathered at the market this morning. And at this moment, the rumors about the bank were spreading throughout the city, following people's shadows. Damn it! What's going on? The bank manager couldn't believe it. The situation in the city, which had been peaceful until now, had become like this in just one day. He had no choice but to resort to his last hope. When the city reached this state, there was only one thing to do. Block them somehow. I'll come up with something, so buy as much time as possible. Yes! The bank employees responded to his orders, and as if on cue, they began to draw out the energy of the fruits they had eaten. Crackle! Their skin instantly hardened like bark. Even if it wasn't to the extent that the bank manager showed, the bank employees gathered here were those who had consumed the most fruits in the city. And they could easily learn how to use this power from the bank manager's demonstration a while ago. It seemed like they could buy some time with this much power, as the bank manager ordered. Their defense increased as their skin hardened, but none of them knew what the bank manager was planning to do now. Crack! The bank manager tore up the bank floor in front of everyone, and the vault hidden underneath was revealed. A secret vault? There was a vault we didn't know about? Don't tell me the fruits are in there? Or weapons? The first thing that came to mind were the fruits, but what the bank manager took out after opening the secret vault wasn't any of that. A stone tablet? It was a small stone tablet with strange patterns engraved on it. While everyone was puzzled, the bank manager gritted his teeth and gripped the stone tablet. Just hold them off. In the meantime, I'll go buy fruits from another city. The bank employee's eyes widened. This city was the last villain's paradise left in North Korea. But villains' cities didn't exist only in North Korea. Although they had only heard rumors, there were villains who escaped to avoid the association into China and Russia. Who? I'd rather die than ask those guys for help, but I have no choice. I'll have to go to either China or Russia and buy at least a few hundred from whoever sells the fruits cheaper. Again, thanks to that damned bastard, they had plenty of money. The bank manager sighed and activated the stone tablet. Whoosh! As the red energy emanating from the bank manager's hand made the stone tablet flash, the space before him distorted and a gate opened. At that time, Association President, we have a message. Oh? Somebody approached Woo Jinchul, who was taking a breather on the pile of magical beast corpses. The hunter handed him a walkie-talkie along with a water bottle. Thank you. I was thirsty. Woo Jinchul gulped down the water and turned on the walkie-talkie. It looked old, but it was a state-of-the-art device that maintained communication even in this foggy apocalypse. Static, and a calm voice came from the walkie-talkie after a moment. Reporting, this is the Shadow of Paradise. An anomaly has occurred. A riot broke out in the city. It's because of a villain named Beru who first arrived in the city yesterday. Woo Jinchul, who was leisurely listening to the report, suddenly spat out the water in his mouth in surprise. The hunter who brought the walkie-talkie couldn't help but be even more nervous at his visibly flustered appearance. Association President Woo Jinchul, who always calmly and coldly controlled everything, was this flustered? Just how serious is the situation on the other side of the walkie-talkie? No, wait, is he laughing now? The hunter was momentarily confused. Woo Jinchul pushed up his black sunglasses and asked into the walkie-talkie. Look, you're saying Beru appeared there? Woo Jinchul's lips curled up into a grin as if he hadn't been flustered at all. Chapter 284. Chapter 282. An emergency alert was issued in the city. Wah! What? Are those debtors crazy? What's gotten into them? Thud, 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 thud! In just one day. The peaceful city of Paradise was suddenly thrown into chaos in a single day. The market guys were making a fuss this morning, and now the debtors, consumed by madness, were charging towards the bank all at once. Flash, kaboom. The debtors' momentum was ferocious as they wielded their weapons and unleashed their magic power. They still had the credit chokers that had been binding them around their necks, and even now, the LED numbers on the neckbands were counting up as the interest was gradually increasing. Don't they value their lives? Knowing that the bomb on their necks could explode at any moment. The citizens of the city couldn't help but panic at the sight. But they also knew the credit chokers didn't explode at any time. They only exploded when one couldn't repay their debts. As long as they paid the interest on time, even the bank, boasting its mighty power, couldn't explode the device at will. Those debtors knew that fact well, so they could attack the bank so recklessly. But why didn't they do this before, even though they knew that? It was because they were scared, of course. More precisely, aren't they scared of the banker's fruits? The bank, which possessed a lot of Alfheim's fruits in this land, where healers were scarce, was truly invincible. How could they fight those who could instantly recover from exhaustion and heal from injuries just by eating the fruits piled up in the warehouse? Especially when they were determined to defend the bank like this, those bankers became immortals. Of course, if they kept fighting, they might win somehow. They could push through with greater power and numbers. But what would be left then? If they were injured during the battle, it would be an issue. But there was a more fundamental problem. If the bank disappears, where will they repay their debts? That's right. Even if the bank disappeared, the debt wouldn't. Instead, with nowhere to repay the debt, the interest would only increase with time. And boom, in the end, their heads would explode and they would all die. But that sounds fun, someone muttered. The citizens next to him also began to watch the battle between the rioting debtors and the bank employees with smirks on their faces. That's right. This was a city of villains. If they were good people who cared about the lives of debtors, they wouldn't have been chased by the association and fled to North Korea. Hey, put some more effort into it. You're losing ground. Hang in there like a bulldog. There were even citizens cheering for their rampage, but they didn't truly want them to win. Kaboom! Poo-ha-ha! One of them died. How stupid. He should have blocked the choker, not the leg. Laughter erupted at someone's death. The debtors had a fatal weakness. The choker, it exploded if they tried to forcibly remove it or if it received a certain amount of external impact. The bank employees, knowing this, were attacking the debtors' chokers whenever they saw an opening. It was a very wise decision to overcome their overwhelming numerical disadvantage. And then the citizens who were watching began to notice something strange. Huh? Why are the bankers' wounds? The bankers were accumulating more and more injuries as time passed, but none of them retreated to eat the fruit. Wait, don't tell me. Was that rumor true? The citizens' eyes changed. The debtors, who had long been tormented by the bank and filled with resentment, turned into rioters as soon as they heard the rumor, but the citizens without debt inevitably received the rumor later. There was no reason for the ordinary people to suddenly become bank robbers just because they heard the rumor that the bank's warehouse had run out of fruits. But what if that rumor was true? Oh my, now things are different. Lick. You're right, heh. The citizens who were just watching with their arms crossed began to salivate one by one. If that rumor is true, should I join in? It seems like those guys are getting tired. No one in this city hated money. Even those who weren't debtors wanted more of it. And if the bank collapsed, it would actually be a good thing for ordinary citizens who didn't have chokers. Even if this city falls, the enforcers will build another one. It's much more profitable to just take the money and move to another city. To make matters worse, even the citizens without debt turned into rioters. It was very unfortunate news for the bank employees who were increasingly exhausted from dealing with the debtors. Are these guys all on drugs? Why are they like this today? The bank employees gritted their teeth and mustered all their strength. Fortunately, they also had a last resort against the rioters. The ability to draw out the energy of the fruits they had eaten. They instinctively realized this the moment they witnessed the bank manager killing the deputy manager. Crack! The bank employees' hands pierced through the chests of the dead debtors and grabbed their hearts. Whoosh! And they sucked the power of the fruit accumulated in those hearts with their fingers, like the roots of a tree absorbing nutrients from the surroundings. Rustle. Ugh! Delicious! This really works? Sk! This bastard only ate 5 fruits. They could even tell the exact number of fruits that debtor had eaten, and in proportion to that number, the injuries accumulated on the bank employees' bodies were healed. The remaining energy even amplified their strength. The bank employees grinned as they looked at their fingers, which had become hard and cracked like tree roots, wriggling grotesquely. Even if they looked like this, the effects were amazing. What is that? The eyes of those attacking the bank widened at the sight of the grotesquely transformed bank employees. But their surprise was short-lived. First of all, was there anyone in this city who hadn't eaten a single fruit? Now, not just the bank employees, but also other citizens instinctively realized the ability they possessed. I think I can do that too. Me too. A strange light flickered in the eyes of the debtors who were attacking the bank employees, and without prompting, they scattered and tore open the chests of the nearby corpses, grabbing their hearts. Whoosh! Kya! It really works! This is awesome! It's more efficient than the fruit. Those who joined the fray late trembled with an overwhelming sense of elation as they absorbed the power of the fruit, perhaps because they had no accumulated injuries on their bodies. They could feel the highly concentrated power within their bodies, and they realized a truth they should never have known. Kayaha! What is this? I was a fool to pay money and buy fruits. Stab! You're right. The man who burst into laughter, intoxicated by the feeling of elation, suddenly widened his eyes and froze. A woman's hand, stealthily approaching from behind, suddenly pierced his back and grabbed his heart. Whoosh! The woman, sucking the power of the fruit from the man's heart, whispered in his ear like a devil, "If you could have just killed anyone like this, why did you bother earning money all this time? You." The man couldn't finish his sentence and withered away on the spot with his heart caught in the woman's hand. The bank employees who witnessed the whole scene sighed. This was truly a disaster. We're all dead when the bank manager returns. The enforcers might come by today. Should we run away now? Those who voiced these words were also those who lacked the ability to execute them. Russell, the quick-witted bank employees were already rushing inside the bank, scooping up money before running away. Even if a new city was built by the enforcers, these coins would still be valuable there. There was also someone quietly watching the whole scene from afar. The Reaper, Hassel, had happened to the city, because she had something very important to do now. Strawberry cake. There was only one piece left of the cake she bought at the market this morning. This was important. Should she eat the strawberry on top first, or should she save the strawberry until the very end and eat it in one bite? Gulp. Hassel, who had been staring intently at the last remaining strawberry cake with a serious expression, finally made up her mind. She would save it for tomorrow since it was so precious. And to turn her attention elsewhere, she decided to carry out her mission first. Swish Hustle jumped onto the roof of a building, holding the strawberry cake in one hand and the giant scythe in the other, still slung over her shoulder. No one noticed her presence due to the swift movements. She entered a deserted alley and took out the walkie-talkie she had hidden. Static. After a while, the walkie-talkie turned on, and she calmly reported the situation in the city. Reporting. This is the Shadow of Paradise. An anomaly has occurred. A riot broke out in the city. It's because of a villain named Beru who first arrived in the city yesterday. Pfft. Hassel tilted her head at the sudden noise from the other side of the walkie-talkie. But then she heard Association President Woo Jinchul's voice. You're saying Beru appeared there? Hassel's ears perked up. Was it her imagination? There was a faint hint of laughter in Association President Woo Jinchul's voice. She pondered the report she just gave and faithfully replied, Yes, of course, it's probably just a random pseudonym, so it doesn't mean much. No, it does have meaning. It's very meaningful information to me. Thank you very much for sharing. Hassel was even more bewildered by the reply. It wasn't a city riot, but just a villain's pseudonym. That was valuable? She couldn't even guess the reason. It was then. Was it you? Chill. A voice suddenly came from behind Hassel. She got goosebumps. Someone who could approach so closely without her noticing. Whoosh! Despite her inner surprise, Hassel's body was already swinging her weapon, following her ingrained survival instincts. Crash! The giant scythe cut through the air in a large arc. It was a powerful attack that cleanly cut a nearby wall in half horizontally. But surprisingly, there was no one there. Like it was a ghost that had spoken. Who is it? Shadows are everywhere. Surprisingly, the answer to Hassel's question came from under her feet. As she hurriedly looked down, a pitch-black shadow, its mouth split wide in a grin, was looking up at her from under her feet. Kook! Hassel swung her scythe without hesitation and cut at the shadow. Flash! The scythe of harvest. The scythe made of a star piece cut through space and attacked the shadow. But insignificant. Thud! Hassel was shocked. Her attack was blocked. So easily. Whoosh! Surprisingly, the shadow that was grinning at Hassel suddenly stretched out a black arm and grabbed her scythe with 2 fingers. And then, starting with that arm, it slowly began to rise from the ground. Hassel lost her fighting spirit at that sight. What is this monster? Immeasurable. Hassel felt a bottomless abyss for the first time, and the most terrifying thing was, there's no presence. She couldn't believe it. Even though she was clearly looking at it, it was difficult to read its presence and grasp its location. An absurd difference in level. I'll ask you. A black ant. A humanoid ant, magical beast with wings, its entire body emitting black steam, narrowed its white eyes and stared at Hassel. Lifting the scythe of harvest, it grabbed with 2 fingers from Hassel's hand. Where did you get this weapon? The scythe of harvest, which felt heavy even for Hassel, looked like a trivial toy to that ant magical beast with its enlarged body. It was then, "You're saying Beru went this way?" Whoosh! Suddenly, at someone's voice from afar, the presence of the creature that had completely dominated the area disappeared like a lie. Huh? Her blocked airway cleared, and when Hassel looked ahead again, Keek! Malij! An ant, shrunken to the size of a fist, was flying out of the alley. It had a ridiculously cute head. You couldn't wait and missed me? The ant was dragging the scythe of harvest, which was relatively enormous, on the ground. Chapter 285, Chapter 283. Beru had diligently accumulated magic power by consuming the essence stones Suho brought him. Of course, the efficiency was still low. It was a far cry from the energy he received directly from Sung Jinwoo. But what could he do? In Beru's current situation, he had to be grateful for even this much and live as sparingly as possible. He had to suppress the urge to use his power, even though his hands were itching. If he recklessly consumed the magic power he diligently accumulated, he would have to ask Suho for more to recharge, and that was... For Beru, who had been carrying Suho on his back since he was a baby, it felt like taking a child's pocket money to support the household, which didn't feel good. Each essence stone was precious and expensive on Earth. What a nuisance it would be to ask for more. But the situation was completely different if the opponent was an apostle of the outer gods, a weapon made from a spar piece. How and where did they gather enough of them to make a weapon? It was a reasonable suspicion. Beru, who was secretly following the Reaper Hasul, was convinced that she was either an apostle of the outer gods or a closely related pawn. She was even an S-rank villain. If she really was a force of the outer gods, it would be a greater loss to wait for Suho and miss the opportunity. So, if necessary, he was even willing to consume the magic power he had diligently saved to kill her himself. He could kill her to prevent her from escaping, and then either turn her into a shadow soldier or directly devour her brain to extract the memories. But fortunately, that didn't happen. Keek, my liege. It was fortunate for both Beru and Hasul. You couldn't wait and missed me? At the appearance of Suho, who came to the alley where Beru entered, he instantly shrank. If Suho was here, he could leave it to him. The best-case scenario would be to kill Hasul with Harmakan's help and gain experience points. You are? Hasul, overwhelmed by Beru's sudden presence, recognized Suho, who appeared just in time, and her eyes widened. The bakery? He was the bakery owner she saw at the market this morning. But why did he suddenly appear here? And why was that black ant magical beast clinging to that man and acting cute? No, was it just acting cute? Looking again, it seemed like it wasn't pretending, but being genuinely affectionate. In any case, in that moment of confusion, did something happen there? A voice came from the walkie-talkie in her hand. Hasul quickly stepped back and spoke into the walkie-talkie. That. But she couldn't utter more. Perhaps due to the lingering pressure from the ant magical beast, she couldn't even organize her thoughts. It was then, swah! The walkie-talkie in Hasul's hand suddenly floated in the air, as if snatched by an invisible hand. It flew through the air and landed in the bakery owner's palm. She couldn't help but be surprised. Magic. Strange. She couldn't feel even the slightest flow of magic power for a skill, but this was only natural. First and foremost, the ruler's authority was a skill that didn't consume mana. It was practically Suho's third hand that he was born with. Bzzz. Please respond. Shadow of Paradise. What's happening there? Hello, Association President Woo Jinchul. This is Beru. Suho suddenly greeted the other side through Hassel's walkie-talkie. He could sense a flustered reaction, but Woo Jinchul, who quickly grasped the situation, asked in a calm tone, "Is that Hunter Sung, Suho?" "Oh, you recognized me right away?" "Of course, your voice is exactly like your father's." As a son grows, his voice naturally becomes more like his father's. The moment Woo Jinchul heard Suho's voice through the walkie-talkie, he felt like he was talking to Sung Jinwoo. Besides, as far as I know, I'm the only human in this world who remembers the name Beru. A faint longing could be felt from Woo Jinchul's voice, which had a hint of laughter. That's right. Woo Jinchul was the closest friend and colleague who spent decades with Sung Jinwoo. And at the same time, he was the human who remembered all the lost history that had become a forgotten past. Moreover, he didn't just have personal memories related to him. He knew everything. This was because Sung Jinwoo, in the world before the Cup of Reincarnation was used, directly transmitted all the memories of the Shadow Monarch he saw, that is, the truth about the war between the rulers and monarchs, into Woo Jinchul's mind. You used that pseudonym for this purpose, didn't you? Ah, yes. I thought if there was anyone who recognized the name Beru, it would definitely be you, Association President. Is that so? Beru was surprised at those words. I thought you used my name because you wanted to become a great ant like me one day. Beru was instantly disappointed. Little Suho, who diligently drew only ants with black crayons on a white drawing paper since childhood, clearly wanted to become an ant. As expected. But is Hassel safe? She's a spy we planted in that city. Yes, well. Suho glanced at Hassel as he answered. She was standing awkwardly, unable to do anything as Suho and Woo Jinchul suddenly started talking. At the same time, she was clearly wary of Beru, who was clinging to Suho's side. For her sake, Suho suddenly took out something from seemingly out of nowhere and handed it to her. Here, eat this for now. Hassel's eyes sparkled. It was strawberry cake. And this time, it wasn't even a slice, but a proper whole cake. Hasul, who gently received it with both hands, immediately calmed down, and she finally made the important decision to eat the last piece of cake she saved right now. More importantly, I have many questions I want to ask Hunter Sung Suho. I don't know the exact situation in the city, but if possible, could you explain a few things? Of course, but please speak comfortably. You're my father's friend, aren't you? Haha. It's okay. I'm comfortable with formal speech. I happen to see the weakest weapon of mankind, an E-rank hunter, saving the world, so I've contracted a disease where I can't treat anyone casually anymore. Oh dear. Along with appropriate jokes, Suho answered Woo Jinchul's questions one by one. The first was, of course, about Sung Jinwoo. But Woo Jinchul's expectations turned into disappointment at Suho's response. Nevertheless, there was still hope. It's truly fortunate that Hunter Cha Hae-in, CEO Yu Jinho, and even Thomas Andre have regained their memories. Humanity has gained great strength. Are there any others? And Hunter Sung Suho, can you restore anyone's lost memories if you want? At Woo Jinchul's most essential question, it was Beru, not Suho, who answered. It's not possible for everyone. Basically, it's much easier to restore the memories of those who are directly connected to the monarch like you. Of course, in a broader sense, all humans on Earth have been saved by the king and are indirectly connected, but it's a bit difficult to do that. Wait, is that really you, Beru? Woo Jinchul, who recognized Beru's voice, showed an even more shocked reaction than when he spoke to Suho. Shadow Ant, with a very satisfied and smug expression, shrugged at Suho. See? This is how great I am. It really was you, Beru. A relieved sigh came from Woo Jinchul. It was unfortunate that Sung Jinwoo wasn't on Earth, but how amazing was it that Beru was here? Woo Jinchul remembered it clearly, the Jeju Island raid where numerous S-rank hunters put all their effort. The natural disaster-level calamity that mercilessly slaughtered all those hunters was the magical beast, Beru. But now he had reformed and become one of Sung Jinwoo's core forces, so it was truly a tremendous gain for humanity. This is a relief, truly a relief. Suho looked at the mini-sized Beru with a slightly troubled expression at Woo Jinchul's relieved reaction, who was comforted just by hearing Beru's voice. Keek? Why are you looking at me like that? You can admire me as much as you want. Woo Jinchu, L, who was passionately explaining Beru's truly amazing prime to Suho, probably wouldn't even be able to imagine this shrunken form of his. I need to get more essence stones. Suho made a firm resolution, and after hearing about various things he was curious about from Suho, Woo Jinchul asked his last question. Anyway, so what's the current situation in that city? You instigated the citizens and caused a riot at the bank in just one day? Woo Jinchul had already heard about what Suho did from Hasul. It was truly amazing, even thinking about it again. But the important thing at this point was the strategy going forward. Do you have any plans? That city is a difficult place for us to touch, so we've only planted spies and are monitoring the situation inside. The association hunters led by Woo Jinchul had been wiping out the villains' cities whenever they found them. But there was a reason why they couldn't easily touch this one. The walls. The incredibly large and tall walls surrounding the city were extremely robust barriers that wouldn't burn even with Choi Jong-in's fire attacks. And perhaps thanks to those walls, all the villains who had scattered to avoid the association were gathering to live in this city, one by one. The combined power of those villains was overwhelmingly greater than that of the association hunters, Woo Jinchul brought from South Korea. Of course, they could somehow deal with them if they pushed themselves, but the problem was what came after. It was relatively recent that Woo Jinchul realized that even though he had destroyed the villains' cities countless times, other ones were being built in new locations. In the end, to fundamentally eliminate all the villains, we have to catch the enforcers. This is also information I learned thanks to having Hasul in that city. Our people's faces are already known to the villains there, so not just anyone can pass through the gates. Crash bang. Even as they had this leisurely conversation, this city was turning into a fierce battlefield in real time. Blood splattered, screams erupted. A gory battle where it didn't matter who was an ally or an enemy, because the villains, who lived for their own desires, realized that they could absorb the power of the fruit by killing each other. Their blood and flesh were splattered and scattered throughout the city. But there was one thing no one noticed, even now. All the withered corpses were silently melting into the ground behind everyone's back. As a result, Russell, on the outskirts of Paradise City, Circa, who was blankly watching the villains war from outside the secluded alley where Suho and Hasul entered, looked up at the falling leaves. Red leaves were fluttering from the sky. Even those of Alfheim, which were green until last night, were gradually turning red. Under that beautiful scenery, it smells familiar. Circa closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She could feel the familiar winter air on the tip of her nose. She looked up at the sky and muttered, "Winter is coming." Chapter 286, Chapter 284. It was autumn. The fluttering red leaves falling one by one eventually filled the entire sky. King of the Snowfolk and the Monarch of Frost warns that autumn has arrived. Autumn always came abruptly and left in an instant. King of the Snowfolk and the Monarch of Frost says that humans brought autumn upon themselves. Sillid was right. Autumn here arrived particularly fast. As if time had accelerated tenfold, the leaves that were lush green just last night were now dyed red and falling. This sight might seem wondrous and beautiful to some, but to those who knew even a little about Elvenwood, it was a terrifying spectacle. The red leaves, soaked in someone's blood, were falling because they couldn't bear the weight of that crimson. For the elves, autumn was an omen of destruction, a season to hurriedly evacuate to avoid being devoured, as it was for all the Elvenwoods that the Monarch of Frost, Salad, experienced. The Alfheim that grew in this city also faced the same season, just with a different name. Rustle, rustle, red leaves covered the entire sky and gently landed on the land that was once called Paradise. The omen of destruction appeared in the city where the whole world was dyed red like blood. Whoosh, swoosh, kyuk. What is this? The roots of Alfheim, which suddenly sprouted from the red-dyed ground, began to attack the villains who were fighting amongst themselves. And gulp! 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 What the? Sharp tentacles hidden in the ground pierced their bodies and began to suck out their nutrients. Wait, stop attacking! Alfheim has gone mad! Gulp! Gulp! The villains, who were fighting amongst themselves, stopped in a panic, and they hurriedly tore off and cut the roots that Alfheim suddenly pierced their bodies with. But it was already too late. Whoosh! Slash! Since the entire ground was covered with red leaves, they couldn't tell where the roots would sprout from. It was impossible even for villains with heightened senses. These weren't ordinary leaves. My liege, these leaves have a perception-impairing effect. Beru recognized the true nature of the leaves at a glance and warned Suho. My senses have dulled. Did these leaves turn the entire city into a perception-impairing barrier? All the people in the city were suddenly trapped in a giant perception-impairing barrier. Even Suho's senses were dulled, let alone the other villains. They could only helplessly die, pierced by the roots that sprouted from the ground. It began to take back even the power of the fruits it had fed them. The problem was that the Alfheim here was the largest and most well-grown tree Suho had ever seen. The speed at which its roots sucked out the villain's Thepir power was also terrifyingly fast. Run! Cook! The villains desperately fled from the roots, but even then, victims who withered away like mummies were appearing everywhere. As they died one by one and scattered to escape, they finally faced a shocking truth, just like all the elves once did. Don't tell me all this time? That's right. Alfheim was no longer on their side. It never was. Just food. They finally realized that they were nothing more than high-quality livestock that it had fattened up to consume. Screams filled the city. Red leaves falling from the sky still covered their vision. That scenery was truly beautiful, but not everyone died in vain. Whoosh! A half-moon-shaped weapon cut through the air. Red leaves swirled, and the figure of the Reaper Hassel wielding a giant scythe was revealed. Hassel! The Reapers. Hope appeared in the eyes of the helpless villains who were running away. The Reapers, including Hassel, who had been harvesting at the bank's request, began to fight back. They had to climb the tall tree trunk every day to pick the fruits, so they skillfully dealt with the roots of Alfheim. And that was the same for the bankers who used the Reapers. They received all their salaries in fruits. Although some resolved them to earn coins, they were the group who fundamentally ate more fruits than other citizens. Perhaps thanks to that power accumulated in their bodies, they had some resistance to the perception-impairing effect created by the leaves. Damn it, run! Wait, before that, those fruits. Even in this urgent situation, some bankers spotted the fruits that fell among the leaves covering the ground, and their eyes gleamed with greed. Having personally experienced the effects of the fruit, picking up those ownerless ones was instinctive. Cook! Although some bankers died trying, most were diligently collecting the fruits that fell on the ground. King of the Snowfolk and the Monarch of Frost clicks his tongue. Watching this whole series of events, Silad felt a deep sense of sorrow. The autumn that the elves experienced had come to humans as well. Even if they were a different race, it wasn't pleasant to see this sight again. It was then. Damn it, has it already started? The bank manager, who went to another country through the gate, returned to this city. Witnessing the city's situation belatedly, he gritted his teeth. He hurried as much as he could, but the Russians were greedy and delayed him. But even then, this speed was absurdly fast. Nothing happened until this morning. This is all because of that bastard Beru. If he hadn't let that damned newbie into the city yesterday, this wouldn't have happened. But what could he do? There was nothing that could reverse things at this point. All he could do was to follow the natural order. Ha! How hard I worked to raise this place. The bank manager rubbed his face with his hands and sighed in frustration, and he began to shove all the fruits he bought from Russia into his mouth. There were quite a few, but he didn't chew and just swallowed them whole. The bank manager's body gradually transformed. His entire skin was covered in hard bark like a withered tree, and all the muscles and fibers that made up his body split like tree branches. Bank manager. The bank employees belatedly noticed his return and rushed towards him with joy. The bank manager, who had completely shed his human form, gave them orders with emotionless eyes. This place is done for. We're leaving immediately. Before that, let's take some of the fruits. Kyoke! Stab. The bank manager instantly stabbed and killed the employee who dared to interrupt him and continued speaking with a frown. Shut up and leave. If the enforcers show up, we're all done for. Ah, shit! An ominous feeling suddenly washed over him. The bank manager hurriedly looked up, and there, above the branches of Alfheim, stripped bare of all its leaves, 5 fruits were swelling. What's that? Fruits? The bank employees, following the bank manager's gaze, widened their eyes. The size and shape were completely different from the fruits of Alfheim they knew. It was more like an egg than a fruit. Shit, run! The bank manager's body sprang up like a coiled spring. It was now every man for himself. He didn't have the time to worry about others. The bank employees, seeing the manager running away without looking back, also sensed something and scattered in a panic. But it was too late. Pop! Bang! The abnormally swollen fruits began to explode like balloons simultaneously, and enforcers emerged from within. Although humans called them enforcers, their true nature was neither human nor anything else. Whoosh! What erupted from within was winter itself, or as Silad called it, a harsh winter. Whoosh! Along with the sound of balloons popping, a tremendous blizzard erupted from within and swallowed the entire city. The red season instantly turned the entire world white. Uwak, bank manager! What is this? What else? It's the enforcers. If we don't escape now, we'll all freeze to death. From now on, it's every man for himself. With those last words, the bank manager disappeared into the blizzard. But Ak! Hearing the manager's scream from beyond, the bank employees who were following him immediately turned around and scattered. They had caught a glimpse of something in the white blizzard. There was a giant monster holding the bank manager's head in its hand. Spirit of Frost. Spirit of Frost. The true identity of the enforcers was finally revealed before Suho's eyes. Were the enforcers spirits? Suho's eyes gleamed sharply. His sense stat was ringing alarm bells. Just how many nutrients had they sucked out of Alfheim all this time? It didn't feel right to simply call them spirits. Their level was completely different from those he easily defeated on his way here. Keek, don't tell me that's... Beru called out to Suho with a serious expression. While fighting alongside Sung Jinwoo in outer space, Beru was always surrounded by the ruler's soldiers, the angels. That's why he immediately realized what was happening, how these enforcers were born as soon as he saw them. My liege, they resemble the angels being born from the fruits of the world tree. What? Suho's expression hardened at those words. The world tree, rooted in the Sea of Souls, bore fruit using the souls of the dead as nutrients. And angels were born from those special fruits that contained the most energy. But to think that the Alfheim, no, the Elvenwood here was the same? The only difference was that it used bodies instead of souls as nutrients. It consumed living beings as nutrients, and the spirits of frost were born from the most special fruits among the numerous others. Is Elvenwood imitating the world tree, or are they originally the same kind? He was curious, but solving the immediate problem was the priority. Beru shouted, pointing at the spirits of frost that revealed themselves. Seeing this, angels are also just spirits in a broader sense. That means those spirits of frost are also. They were on the same level as the ruler's soldiers, the angels. Just 5 fruits. Only 5 were born, but the cold wave was enough to cover this entire area and freeze the whole world. Just then, warning messages began to appear before Suho's eyes one after another. Ding, 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 ding. Winter of Frost has begun. Frostbite is activated. Movement speed is gradually decreasing. Attack speed is gradually decreasing. The effect of debuff, Frostbite, continues to stack over time. It was truly a natural disaster. Like when he entered the Sea of Souls, powerful and chilling warnings were ringing. But, flare. It was different from then, because the flames from the Dragon King's heart were blazing in Suho's entire body. Dragon King's heart negates the effect of debuff, Frostbite. Even in this world, Suho's body temperature was close to boiling with black-red heat. But it seemed like that fact was quite irritating to the spirits of frost. Whoosh! Who is it? The one who dares defy us. The 5 spirits of frost, who instinctively absorbed heat from all living beings with warmth since birth, simultaneously turned to Suho. As they swelled their bodies along with the surrounding blizzard, it was enough to fill the entire sky. We execute winter, rumble. The enforcers. They surrounded Suho to execute the winter that was a disaster for the elves. So what do you think? Suho was smiling, as if this was rather fortunate. Do they seem useful? Instead of answering Suho's question, Circa said something unexpected. Stretch. Ha, this is refreshing. She was stretching with a truly rejuvenated expression. Whoosh. In the blizzard where he couldn't see an inch ahead, the harsh winter, the curse and disaster that had always been the bane of the elves since the beginning of time. But what did that matter? Circa was a child of winter who took her first breath and learned to walk in this cold from the moment she was born. If Suho overcame the cold with the Dragon King's heart, Circa was the opposite. It feels like I've come home. She was smiling brightly, taking in the refreshing air. King of the Snowfolk and the Monarch of Frost, grins meaningfully. That's right. Sil, lad, the first ice elf. His descendant grinned and ran towards the harsh winter without hesitation, lightly stepping on the blizzard. Chapter 287, Chapter 285, whoosh! In the whirling snowstorm, Circa's footsteps as she leaped from one pure white snowflake to another were light and cheerful, as if she was taking a stroll. But her speed increased rapidly, and soon she caught up to the speed of the raging blizzard. What the spirits of frost were bewildered. How dare you defy us? Their enraged voices boomed through the blizzard. Their anger was justified. They were the spirits of frost, the executors of winter. How dare a mere elf defy winter? Just accept it, submit and endure. Because winter wasn't something a mere creature could defy. That is the fate given to creations. Whoosh, the blizzard, raging from all directions, swallowed Circa whole. White breath finally escaped Circa's lips as she ran through the sky in the harsh cold. We execute winter. We execute winter. Swoosh, but nothing could stop Circa's steps. Even in that intense cold, she didn't flinch. Rather, the fiercer the blizzard, the faster she went, the pinnacle of elven footsteps. And spirit armament. With each step forward, pure white snowflakes clung to Circa's body. Crackle, giant ice armor began to form. As its size grew, she clenched her fist, and the ice tree spear sprouted, transforming into a giant hammer. She swung it. Whoosh! Crash! With that one blow, a tremendous explosion erupted, and the direction of the blizzard reversed. The spirit of frost, its size overwhelming enough to fill her vision, visibly faltered. It's working. Circa's eyes gleamed sharply. The giant hammer she wielded grew even larger, and she struck again. Crash! The blizzard screamed. The harsh cold was mercilessly torn and scattered. Circa's attack was that ruthless and relentless. Crash! Bang! 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 Bah! The enraged spirit of frost's giant hand grabbed Circa. Whoosh! But she broke through and struck the creature's hand, arm, shoulder, and face. It was a truly astonishing sight. The harsh winter itself, born from the fruit of elvenwood. Circa's figure, bravely challenging those overwhelming beings, was like a single flower that bloomed through the cold, icy ground. King of the Snowfolk and the Monarch of Frost grins, baring his teeth. King of the Snowfolk and the Monarch of Frost urges her to dominate the spirits instead of wrestling with them. Silad's nagging continued. To both of them, Circa took his advice to heart. Like this? Grab. Circa leaped to the very end of the sky and finally grabbed the head of the spirit of frost with her hand covered in a giant ice gauntlet. How dare you! The spirit of frost resisted, and the blizzard in the area surged, trying to throw her off. No, to push her away. But it couldn't push her away at all. Circa, still gripping the creature's head, was looking down at it from that dizzying height. Shut up and submit, with a haughty and domineering gaze like a queen. You're mine now. The creature shuddered under her firm gaze. It roared and resisted. Something was wrong. This was absurd. A mere elf. How can a mere creature defy winter? Circa scoffed at the spirit's resistance. These guys were mistaken from the beginning. The reason why the former monarch, Silad, created a sanctuary in the land of harsh cold and allowed the elves to live on that frozen land. It was all for this moment, so that any of his descendants, whoever succeeded him among the ice elves, would never again submit to something like winter. Our winter started from the moment we were born, so even if it wasn't me but any other ice elf here, you would be nothing to us. King of the snowfolk and the monarch of frost, smiles with satisfaction. So, kneel. Circa, inheriting his will, continued firmly. Whoosh! Holding the creature's head with one hand, she raised the other, holding the hammer high in the sky. If you don't want to be beaten to death, and she struck down mercilessly. Crash! Bang! 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 Countless times, repeatedly, until the creature's giant body was crushed and finally lay flat on the ground. That must hurt a lot. Suho and Beru, who were watching from afar, were speechless. The children born in winter were strong, because they couldn't survive in this place without being tough. But there were 5 enemies. The spirit of frost that Circa was personally beating to death was just one. Then what about the other 4? Whoosh! The blizzard swirled haphazardly. Judging from the direction, don't tell me they're running away? It seems so. The remaining 4 spirits were scattering in all directions from where Circa was, but it was too overwhelming and ferocious to be simply running away in fear. We execute winter. We execute wint. Well, it seemed like they had some justification. There was no need for winter to come only to this city, but if they let them escape like that, a harsh winter would surely come to every place they passed. The result was obvious. If we leave them alone, the entire Earth will freeze like the world of the ice elves, right? That's right. And we have to catch them to level up? Beru nodded obediently at Suho's questions. That's right, but there was a reason why they could afford to be this leisurely despite knowing that. Harmakan. Yes, master. Whoosh. As if waiting, Harmakan appeared at Suho's call. Last night, when Suho went to South Korea, he brought him, even though he was researching virtual reality with Yu Jinho. So even if he left for a while, Harmakan still had plenty to do there. Although Suho gave him a lot of different tasks, Harmakan was fundamentally a demonic spirit shaman who enjoyed researching magic. And among that, what they enjoyed the most was playing with souls. Those rare spirits were also interesting test subjects, but even Suho couldn't have anticipated that such creatures would appear. So the reason he brought Harmakan to this city was none other than this. It took a while to create the magic circle because of Elvenwood's leaves, but I just finished it. Well done! Boom! Guac! The spirits of frost, who were trying to escape from Circa, were suddenly trapped inside the city, blocked by a transparent barrier. They were bewildered and enraged. What is this barrier? How dare you try to trap us? Whoosh! Crash bang! The rage of the harsh winter struck the transparent wall. The barrier surrounding the city shook violently from the tremendous attack, precariously swaying as if it would break at any moment. But despite that, how can this be? How can a mere spell it didn't budge? Instance Dungeon. This vast barrier, the legacy of Candiaru, also known as the great spellcaster Candiaru, and a candidate for the next monarch, tore through the dimensional gap and dragged the entire Paradise City into a different world. Once trapped here, even the harsh winter couldn't break through the dimensional wall and move to another dimension. But this wasn't because Candiaru was superior to them. His blessing, health, and longevity didn't work on the debuff. Frostbite. Their levels were similar. If Candiaru was the eternal second-in-command of the magic world, who could never surpass the king, the monarch of transfiguration, the spirits of frost were the strongest spirits that Scylla forcibly subjugated to become a monarch. They were similar in strength. But despite that, most of the spells that Candiaru enthusiastically designed for just one person, the Shadow Monarch, were techniques that worked even on higher-level beings like monarchs. Grab! Let us out now! We will execute Wint. Grab! Where do you think you're going? One of the spirits of frost that was frantically striking the transparent barrier was finally caught by the hair by Circa, who chased it from behind. The creature turned around and was horrified. It saw what had become of the spirit that was caught by Circa earlier. A pure white snowfield. That absolute being that was the executor of winter was completely crushed, lying flat under Circa's feet. It was the ultimate humiliation for the harsh winter that should be freely blowing across the world. How dare you! Guac! Bang, 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 bang! Submit, if you don't want to die. Of course, it was no different for the second spirit. violence and coercion began again. And in the meantime, only the villains in the city were dying. Those who were fighting amongst themselves to devour each other eventually collapsed on the snowy field, one by one, unable to withstand the cold, like the elves who froze to death while fleeing the winter. But there was no need to mourn their deaths. Evil spirits who committed murder, they're my favorite ingredients. Harmakan was smiling. Playing with evil spirits was always fun. Especially after seeing the villains riot and the terrible chaos today, Harmakan added a spell when creating this instance dungeon. Ding! Activating skill, Mirage, throughout the instance dungeon. Mirage, the powerful illusion magic used by the demonic illusionist Javier, whom he fought in Hyundai, which extracted and showed the most terrifying or intense moments from the target's memories. Through that illusion magic, Javier enjoyed watching the various fears hidden within the lowly human heart. But Harmakan was the grand chieftain of the demonic spirits, far superior to him. If Javier used the sandstorm as material for his illusion magic, Harmakan could create an even more powerful spell using the blizzard here. As a result, why did you kill me? I begged you to spare me. The villains who were losing consciousness on the snowfield couldn't help but open their eyes wide in horror. Before their eyes were the people they killed, in the form of cold corpses covered in dried blood. What? How? But I killed them. The villains instinctively wanted to back away from that terrible nightmare, but their bodies, frozen in the cold, wouldn't move. I begged you to spare me! Whack! Save me! They died, trapped in the nightmares they brought upon themselves. Was it because there were many villains living in the city? Or was it because of the evil deeds they had piled up? Suho leveled up, but his gaze wasn't on the status window. Was it because the leaves that caused perception impairment were covered in snow? Now that his dulled senses had returned, he could feel something. Suho suddenly raised his head, his sharp eyes glaring at the snowy sky, and asked, "Who are you?" Rumble, the Apostle of Paradise is watching you. Beyond the instance dungeon, an eerie gaze was watching them from somewhere far away. Chapter 288. Chapter 286. Skill Mirage. A terrifying illusion magic that extracted and showed the most terrifying or intense moment from the target's memory. Just as Javier once did, Harmakan also created this powerful barrier and trapped all the villains in the city within the white blizzard. Of course, this illusion magic was different from Javier's because it was cast by Harmakan. Even with the same spell, the result differed depending on the caster's preference. In short, Harmakan's preference were evil spirits. Therefore, this recreation of Mirage had a stronger effect on evil souls, and all the villains living in the city faced all the evil deeds they had committed, especially murder. They now received all the resentment of the countless victims they mercilessly killed. And it goes without saying that the Reaper Hasul was among them. Hasul suddenly came to her senses and realized she was wearing her school uniform. She looked around in surprise, and the surroundings were still winter. But instead of a harsh blizzard, snowflakes were gently falling, and before her, Flare, was an orphanage engulfed in flames. Like the other villains, Hasul's reaction to facing her nightmare was rather calm. She couldn't help it. Recalling this moment was an everyday occurrence. How could she forget? This dream again. Winter of her first year of high school. Hasul awakened, and she killed the orphanage director, that woman who always forced the children to smile in front of sponsors, a two-faced person who turned into a demon behind their backs. The old woman who put on an angelic smile in front of the public and then turned around and hysterically abused the children after they left. Even in retrospect, she deserved to die. This nightmare seems familiar. Suddenly, a voice chuckled in Hasul's ear. A sob story from a villain. Hasul replied as if entranced by that voice, "I'm not trying to tell a sob story. I'm just an ordinary bad bitch. I killed someone and ran away. That's all." And she set the orphanage on fire, because the same thing would happen again if a new director came. But she had no regrets. Even if she went back to that day, she would do the same thing. However, there was one thing, one regret. Choi Hasul. She instinctively flinched at the sharp voice calling her name. The director was walking towards her, opening the door of the burning orphanage. "You should have smiled more in front of the sponsors." shouting at her with the usual vicious look in her eyes. But Hassel didn't back down from that nightmare. She was used to this. This nightmare has repeated every night since that day. For some reason, it was much more vivid than usual today, but it was no different. Was that why? Perhaps because it was a more vivid nightmare than usual, Hassel asked the director with a little more courage. "Are you alive?" she finally asked. Hassel had always been curious whether the woman really died that day, or if she was rescued later and managed to cling to her life. "I didn't check and just came here." That's right. The origin of this nightmare was Hassel's one remaining regret. What if that director was still alive? That possibility was a truly terrifying horror for her. I should have checked. Regret always came late. Not many people could kill someone as soon as they awakened to superpowers. Hasul was one of them. So instead of killing the director directly, she chose to burn the orphanage. After evacuating her younger siblings, she set fire to the director's office. She didn't have the courage to kill her directly. She didn't even have the courage to go back and confirm the director's death, because she was scared. No matter how much she awakened to her powers, the moment she faced the director, she would surely freeze like a deer in headlights. And whenever she felt this way, Hassel had a phrase she compulsively muttered. Words she said to comfort her younger siblings who came to her every night in tears, and to herself. To her, it wasn't comforting or anything. "It's okay. It's not our fault. We were just unlucky. There must be many ordinary and normal orphanages out there." Yes, looking back, it was all a matter of luck. That her mother, whose face she couldn't even remember, abandoned her at such a terrible orphanage was because of bad luck. And the gangsters who ran that orphanage were also just unlucky. It was just their bad luck that someone like me suddenly awakened as an S rank in the orphanage they were running. "So you killed them all?" someone whispered. Hassel answered, "Yes, I killed them all. I even went to the gangsters' buildings and killed and burned them all, for my younger siblings who were left behind." Whoosh! The nightmare of the burning orphanage passed before Hassel's eyes. Actually, the real hell for Hassel started after that. After killing everyone involved, I crossed the 38th parallel without hesitation, towards North Korea, which had become a true hell. But Hasul wasn't afraid. It seemed easier to live in North Korea, which was already completely ruined, than to live in that damn South Korea. And it actually was. Since she had burned away all her fears, there was nothing left to be scared of. The world she saw from inside the orphanage was extremely cold, a world where she could never live an ordinary life with ordinary effort, a world where the story of a phoenix rising from ashes was unimaginable. She had gained an ability that could help her escape from that world, so there was no reason not to leave. Natural disasters, weather anomalies, strange magical beasts and aliens. She had already learned what true fear was at too young an age to be afraid of such things. Humans. There's nothing more terrifying than humans. The strongest villain living in the city of villains smirked as she finished speaking. There was one thing she regretted, that it all happened before the association was established, so she didn't know that the power she awakened to was S-rank. She only learned that an S-rank hunter could enjoy immense wealth and honor from the villains who came to North Korea later. But she only regretted, not resented it. Wealth and honor, she could enjoy them anywhere as long as she had power. This place is the same. Then shouldn't you protect it? Your paradise? A voice whispered to Hustle like a devil. Whoosh! A giant scythe made of a star piece was once again held in her hand. The scythe of harvest that was taken away by the black ant magical beast was back, and the moment she held that weapon, a hot energy suddenly boiled within Hasul's body. This power, Hasul instinctively realized the source of this power, the fruits of Alfheim that she had eaten so far. Excluding the bankers, she was probably the villain who ate the most fruits in this city. We'll lend you our strength. Protect this city with your own hands. Flare. In an instant, a red aura enveloped Hustle's entire body, and she instinctively swung the scythe of harvest forward, cutting through the air. That power drew a half-moon and pierced a hole in the transparent wall of the instance dungeon that covered the city. Well done. The voice laughed. Whoosh! At that moment, the blizzard that was trapped inside the city began to be sucked out through that hole. It was truly a tremendous force. And what was revealed were the red leaves buried under the pure white snowfield. Whoosh! As Hassel swung her scythe again, the red and yellow autumn leaves fluttered beautifully in the air along its trajectory. Since those leaves fundamentally had a perception-impairing effect, Hassel's presence disappeared from the world at that moment. Swoosh! Concealing her presence to the point where no one could notice, she jumped high into the sky, stepping on the red leaves like stairs, and there was a being waiting for her at the end of that. Yes, very well done. You're a good child. The Apostle of Paradise. He was waiting for Hasul outside the instance dungeon, with a bright smile. I hereby appoint you as the High Priest. From this moment on, you are the High God Priest of the glorious cult of the outer gods. Flash. At that moment, power concentrated is the scythe that Hasul held, and the Apostle of Paradise, as if manipulating a puppet, gave her an order. Heh, can you feel it? The difference in strength? I will give you all the power that has borne fruit in this city. Whoosh! Hassel raised the scythe of harvest with her usual expressionless face at those words. A tremendous power began to concentrate on the blade. The Apostle of Paradise smiled with satisfaction at that dependable figure and pointed to the center of the city with his finger, strongly commanding, Now, go! Towards the enemies who dared to destroy your city, my flower pot. What are you doing? Whoosh! The Apostle of Paradise couldn't help but panic. Surprisingly, Hassel's scythe suddenly attacked him, and using the very power he gave her, the Apostle of Paradise barely dodged the attack and shouted, What the? What are you doing? For the High Priest to dare attack the Apostle of Paradise couldn't help but be shocked at the absurd event. It was then. You asked what I'm doing? Covered in goosebumps. The Apostle of Paradise hurriedly turned his gaze to the sudden voice. Hassel's shadow, which was relentlessly attacking, was abnormally elongated and grinning at him. At that moment, wait, don't tell me you're... The Apostle of Paradise's eyes widened, an ominous yet familiar energy. The Apostle of Paradise instinctively recognized the identity of this sensation. C-Corp's commander? Oh, do you know me? Hassel's shadow raised his eyes with joy at those words, and he continued with a grin. But sadly I don't know you at all. Well, each and every one of those who ever faced me are already dead. Those words could mean only one thing. Beru, slowly rising from Hassel's shadow, declared to the Apostle of Paradise, You are a small fry, one who only watched me from afar. Kook, High Priest, protect me! The Apostle of Paradise gritted his teeth and tried to control Hassel, but it's useless. Shiver. Suho, who had approached from behind, raised his fist and continued, Just in case, I applied the spring water of the Echo Forest to all the bread in Beru baguette. Crash. With that one blow, the Apostle of Paradise crashed to the ground. Chapter 289, Chapter 287. Again, Suho was really busy last night, and not only him, the shadow soldiers were also active behind the scenes. First, they emptied a bakery in South Korea and filled a container, and inside that container, following Beru's command, the shadow soldiers sat in a row and began to open the individually packaged bread like bakery employees. It was a very delicate task, so the soldiers with clumsy hands were mercilessly caught by Beru and kicked out of the container. Didn't I tell you to use the spray bottle for this bread? Beru, who once commanded a massive ant army, became a very strict and charismatic bread factory foreman. You clumsy oafs, how many times do I have to tell you? The shape and sealing of each bread is different. Use the syringe for this bread. Keep it crispy, but carefully inject only the spring water of the Echo Forest into the filling. Thud, thud, thud. In other words, it was manual labor. The shadow soldiers carried out the task in unison under Beru's command. That was how Beru Baguette, where the spring water of the Echo Forest was applied to every bread in various ways, was born. The birth of Beru's bakery in the truest sense. I really thought it might be possible. Suo's plan was successful. Item, spring water of the Echo Faulty. The mysterious spring water of the Echo Forest. When drunk or applied to the body, it has the effect of neutralizing toxins. The spring water of the Echo Forest was an ingredient for making the holy water of life, a very powerful antidote potion that could neutralize the toxicity of the purified blood of the Demon King. And it goes without saying that if it worked on Monarch class, it would also work on Apostle class entities. The spring water of the Echo Forest could even purify the energy of the outer gods. However, the effect was a bit weak, perhaps because the amount applied to each bread was small. That was why Hasol was bewitched by the Apostle of Paradise's call and came to her senses late. But even if it was late, the effect was certain. Crash! Kyok! The Apostle of Paradise crashed to the ground from Suho's powerful blow. The impact created a huge crater as his body was buried in the ground. The Apostle of Paradise groaned and gritted his teeth. His expression was a mixture of anger, shock, and complex emotions, but he didn't have time to lie around leisurely. Swoosh! Suho's second attack was already upon him, but he was only caught off guard because he was surprised at first. He had no intention of being hit twice. The Apostle of Paradise raised his arm towards Suho and swiped his index finger horizontally in the air. Devour him. Mouth of the Vom. Suho's expression hardened. Following the Apostle of Paradise's finger, a giant mouth suddenly opened in the air between him and Suho. Whoosh! At the same time, a tremendous suction force erupted from that opening and began to suck Suho in. With the added momentum of his charge, his body was sucked into the mouth of the void at terrifying speed. My liege! It's dangerous! Gray! Growl. At Suho's call, Gray appeared from under his feet, and carrying Suho on his back, he leaped in the opposite direction. He barely managed to avoid being swallowed, by a hair's breadth. But the mouth of the void, having already opened, began to indiscriminately suck in everything around it with terrifying force. Even the blizzard that filled the city. Whoosh! It was a spectacular sight. The pure white blizzard formed a giant vortex and was sucked into the mouth of the void. Beru recognized what the Apostle of Paradise had done at a glance. It's a dimensional gap. That guy forcibly tore the dimensional wall, to tear the dimensional wall with just a gesture. He had a unique ability despite his poor durability. The dimensional gap. Suho had been there before, but beyond that was an unknown space that couldn't be defined in a single word. It was the universe itself. If you were sucked in there, you could wander aimlessly until you died if you were unlucky. And if you were really lucky, you might be able to find another gap connected to an unknown dimension, but no one could guarantee it. If he keeps doing that, the dimension that makes up Earth itself could collapse, like the demon dimension that was fragmented and scattered, or the elf dimension where the sky collapsed. The best way to close that hole is to cut off that damn finger. Growl. Suho, riding on Gray, ran through the vortex of the blizzard, towards the enemy who was still pointing his index finger in this direction. The Apostle of Paradise, who had risen, glared at Suho and bared his teeth. Not bad, for a human to surprise me this much. You're acting cocky for someone who's about to die. Cough. I'm still fine. The Apostle of Paradise wiped the blood flowing from his mouth with the back of his hand as he listened to Suho's retort. But the fact that he was still pointing his index finger forward with his other hand made it seem like that really was the culprit. Suho already knew because he had hit him once. He's weaker than I thought. Although he was an apostle class, his main body's durability was abysmal compared to the others he had encountered so far. Even Beru criticized him. Judging from the distance, he must have been an apostle who supported from the rear with magic. In terms of class, he was a mage, not a warrior, but the power and versatility of his abilities might be superior to those of a fighter. But conversely, if they didn't give him time to use those abilities, it wouldn't be difficult to deal with him. Are you the one who planted elvenwood on this land? Yes, that's right. This is the garden I painstakingly cultivated. The Apostle of Paradise glared at Suho, who was running towards him through the swirling blizzard. And you're the bastard who ruined my garden like this? His index finger now swiped vertically, and once again the dimensional wall was torn, and the mouth of the void split open even wider in the shape of a cross. The impact was tremendous. Rumble, the suction force instantly increased by 3 to 4 times, and it became difficult even for Gray to maintain his balance. The Dragon King, the monarch of destruction, advises you to use the dragon's breath. Flare. Actually, the Dragon King had been nagging him since earlier, But this damn suction force was the problem. The breath of destruction was such a powerful force that its recoil was also great. In a situation like this, where he couldn't support his body properly, it was difficult to accurately hit with an attack that went in a straight line. But I can create a way. Suho. Use elven footsteps. Circa, who was fighting the spirits of frost on the other side of the city, could be heard shouting, and at once, Suho jumped off Gray's back and leaped, stepping on the blizzard. Elven footsteps. The skill that allowed him to walk on the snow-covered field and the calm surface of the Sea of the Afterlife. Since Circa had already shown the pinnacle of that ability, Suho was confident he could imitate it to some extent. And he added a little trick. Gray, possess me. Growl. Suho's hair fluttered silver with a sacred wind. The spirit of Pet, Gray, possesses the priest's body. Using skill, Grassland's Wind. Movement speed temporarily increases by 30%. Attack speed temporarily increases by 30%. The beast's senses dwelled in Suho's body. Thud! He began to run across the swirling blizzard without hesitation. Although it looked treacherous, as if he would be sucked into the dimensional gap at any moment, Suho precariously slid towards the Apostle of Paradise like he was surfing. Level of skill, Elven Footsteps, has increased. As expected, there was no better training than actual combat. You're using quite an interesting trick. Cough. The Apostle of Paradise seemed a bit flustered as he saw Suho gradually getting used to running on the blizzard. He was pretending to be relaxed on the outside, but he didn't have enough time to recover from the damage he received earlier. Whoosh. Even now, the power of the fruit harvested from this land was healing his wounds in real time, but it seemed like Suho would arrive first. The Apostle of Paradise eventually diverted the power he was using for recovery back into attack. Your struggles are useless. I can just tear open more mouths of the void. Swipe. His finger drew a new line in the air, but before he could tear open the third mouth of the void, flare. Black-red energy was already boiling in Suho's entire body. Wait. The calmness disappeared from the Apostle of Paradise's expression. What is that power? Shock, fear, and terror. Of course, he couldn't help but be surprised. The power Suho unleashed was probably very unfamiliar to the Apostle of Itarim, who had only ever dealt with shadow soldiers, not the Shadow Monarch. Using skill, Breath of Destruction, the identity of this power's owner was none other than the rival who fought a bloody battle with the great Shadow Monarch Sung Jinwoo until the very end of that terrible war. The power of the Dragon King, the Monarch of Destruction, and Taris. Kaboom! The hellfire emanating from Suho's hand melted the swirling blizzard in a straight line and struck the Apostle of Paradise. What? The Apostle of Paradise couldn't help but be terrified before that overwhelming power. Crack! And he instinctively tore open the third mouth of the void, desperately trying to deflect the breath of destruction. But ruler's authority. Suho's eyes flashed intensely, and swoosh! The Apostle of Paradise's eyes widened in horror. He saw two daggers, Kamish's wrath, flying towards him at terrifying speed through the swirling blizzard. But it was because he recognized the identity of the power carried in that attack, more so than the attack itself. No, how can you even have the ruler's authority? This was absurd. What kind of hybrid was this? Using skill slaughter. Slash, 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 slash. The first thing that was slashed off was the Apostles of Paradise finger. And starting with that, his body began to be mercilessly cut down, literally hacked to pieces. Uk! Screams endlessly erupted from his mouth. And in the midst of that pain, he realized that half of his body had already melted. He managed to barely deflect the breath of destruction, but he couldn't block it completely. How dare a mere human? But it wasn't over yet. Do you think I'll die in my garden? Even in that state, the Apostle of Paradise glared at Suho with a venomous expression and spoke. A vicious curse was embedded in his voice. At that moment, the system, realizing the gravity of the situation, urgently displayed a message to Suho. Ding! The Apostle of Paradise recognizes you as the enemy. His eyes, burning with flames, glared at Suho, and he gritted his teeth. You, I will definitely kill you. Crackle. You can look forward to it. By any means necessary, I will definitely. With those words, the remaining body of the Apostle of Paradise began to crumble. not burned by the flames of destruction, but crumbling of his own will and scattering in the wind. Did you finish him off? I think he managed to save himself. The Winter City, blazing with hot flames, the Apostle of Paradise escaped from Suho there, vowing revenge. Bang! Hand over the information on Sungho. What's with you? Did you change bodies? Yuri Orlov of Russia frowned at the sudden appearance of the uninvited guest. He smelled something burning. So did you check what you wanted to check? What is the Shadow Monarch anyway? Shut up and hand over all the information on Sung Suho. I told you to find it by the time I came back, didn't I? Yuri Orlov sipped the wine and leisurely savored the Apostle's expression, which was filled with hatred. To see this guy with his eyes so filled with fury, he had definitely failed, and it made him curious. Ah, right, humans. Humans have families, right? Sung Suho wouldn't be an orphan like you. Family? Yuri Orlov's eyes gleamed like a snake's, filled with pure curiosity. I didn't expect you to go after them. For someone who wasn't interested in the human race to utilize the concept of family? The Apostle of Paradise gritted his teeth and glared at Yuri Orlov's retort. I told you to shut up, didn't I? Before I deal with him directly, I'll prune all his underlings first. Thoroughly, like he did to my broken flower pots. It seems he really was defeated. This is unexpected. Yuri Orlov inwardly raised Sung Suho's threat level by 1 notch as he watched his guest flare up like fire at the slightest provocation. But it didn't matter anyway. This guy before him was as tenacious as a weed, so with a little push, he would be infinitely useful. Don't get so worked up. Yuri Orlov leisurely savored his wine and handed him a thick file from his desk. The information I found is about them anyway. Unlike you, an apostle, I was planning to deal with it humanely from the beginning. Yuri Orlov smiled and pointed the first page of the file. Yangpyeong, go there. All of Sung Suho's weaknesses happen to be gathered there. Chapter 290, Chapter 2188, whoosh. As the Apostle of Paradise fled, the dimensional gap he tore closed on its own. Beru, confirming the complete disappearance of his presence, narrowed his eyes. He must be alive somewhere. The fact that despite knowing me he is still breathing means he's a tenacious one who cherishes his existence. The apostles of Itarim that Beru faced in outer space had various forms and abilities. This was because Itarim wasn't just one being, but many. Since the outer gods that the apostles served were all different, the abilities of the creatures they created were also diverse. Therefore, whenever a new outer god arrived late and joined the battlefield, the nature of the war changed. And from Sung Jinwoo's perspective, who had to block them all, it was practically like endlessly facing a giant allied force with constantly increasing numbers. But although he called them an allied force, there was actually an invisible conflict between the Itarim. They only joined forces temporarily because their goals aligned. They weren't true allies. They were briefly united as one team in the face of the powerful enemy Sung Jinwoo, but their original purpose for invading this universe was monopolization. Even if they somehow defeated the Shadow Monarch's mighty army and succeeded in occupying this universe, their war wouldn't end. In that case, the victorious outer gods would compete with each other to monopolize the vast, masterless magic power remaining in this world. In the process, this universe and the dimension surrounding Earth would be torn into thousands of pieces and forever wander the dimensional gaps. That's why they're good at scheming behind each other's backs, even during battle. It's basic for them to send the forces of other outer gods to the front lines first and keep their own troops back to preserve them. They use all sorts of methods to stab each other in the back. In short, Beru's explanation described a three-way battle. No, perhaps it was more like a battle of dozens, if not hundreds. One of the reasons why Sung Jinwoo could hold his ground against the endless allied forces without retreating was because of this factor working in his favor. Thanks for the explanation, but can you tell me all that later? The situation before Suho wasn't leisurely enough for him to calmly listen to Beru's lengthy explanation. Even though the Apostle of Paradise fled, the battle wasn't over yet. The Apostle's burning, melting body was scattered throughout the city as fertilizer, accelerating Alfheim's rampage. This also had a significant impact on the spirits of Frost, who were being overwhelmed by Circa. Grah! The enraged spirits of frost grew as if to freeze the whole world, and for the first time they repelled Circa's hammer. And that wasn't all. Using skill, breath of destruction. Boom! The breath of destruction that Suho unleashed pierced a large hole in the giant spirit of Frost's body. Rather than burning, it melted. Like cotton candy in water. It was truly the ultimate counter. But surprisingly, that large hole was quickly restored. Whoosh! The surrounding blizzard instantly flew in and filled the wound. The spirits of frost weren't magical beasts, but the season itself. In the end, to completely defeat them, he had to burn down the entire winter that had struck this city, this instant's dungeon. Come out, everyone! Whoosh, using skill, Monarch's Domain. Black shadows spread from Suho's feet, covering the entire city, and the Shadow Army, blazing with black-red flames, rose in unison. All forces, charge! At Suho's command, thousands of shadow soldiers roared and charged forward. The once splendid city of villains began to burn. But their target wasn't the spirits of frost. Those are for Circa to devour. Suho and the Shadow Army aimed for something else. Alfheim. We're taking that tree. He had found the mastermind and uncovered the city's secret, so there was no need to hold back anymore. Whoosh, swoosh, from underground to the sky, thousands of hideous branches and roots attacked from all directions. Alfheim, struck by winter, was a nightmare for the elves. But at this moment, that nightmare was reversed. Befalling the tree. Follow me. That tree is ours. Uproot it, cut off its branches. Foosh, black-red flames blazed from the shadow soldiers' bodies, covering the entire city. They charged towards Alfheim in the blazing flames. Rumble. The ground shook with their footsteps, and the city melted from the flames they breathed. Crack. Alfheim's roots were pulled out and cut down one by the shadow soldiers' attacks. A sea of fire unfolded on the cold winter. It was then. My liege, look over there. Alfheim's roots are covering the entire city. Beru pointed at the walls surrounding the town. It seems like it used the corpses of all the dead villains as nutrients. As Beru said, Alfheim's roots were now covering the entire city like a spider web, and those roots were sucking out all the nutrients from within the walls. Crack! Crackle! Every time the shadow soldiers cut off a root, the corpses of devoured villains poured out from within. They looked like withered bellflowers. It really was a flower pot. Suho frowned. It was no exaggeration to say that this city itself was a giant flower pot for growing Alfheim. Looking again, it seemed certain that the Apostle of Paradise was better at this kind of manipulation than actual combat. Whirl. On the other side, Circa was engaged in a bloody battle with the spirits of frost. Crash. Her giant ice hammer cut through the blizzard and crushed them. How dare you, us! Shut up and submit! Whoosh! With each blow, the spirits' bodies shattered and then reassembled. King of the Snow Folk and the Monarch of Frost clenches his fists. He could practically hear Silad's cheers. The fertilizer scattered by the Apostle of Paradise made the spirits of frost go berserk, but the tide had already turned. Circa had already completely dominated 4 spirits, and now only 1 remained. That side will be over soon, Suho muttered. Most of Alfheim's roots were cut off, and Circa devoured the spirits of frost. All that remained was, ha! Crack! The moment the last root caught in Suho's strong grip was torn off, rumble. Alfheim's trunk fell and split the city in half. A shockwave that shook the heavens and earth struck. But even in that moment, Alfheim attempted one last struggle. Seeing that, Hasul, who had approached Suho, shouted with a tense expression, "This is bad. Alfheim is attempting the last harvest." Last harvest? Hasul, who was a reaper, knew the nature of Alfheim better than anyone. First of all, one of her most important missions, when infiltrating this city, under the orders of Association President Wu Jinchul, was to learn about the characteristics of the tree. Whoosh! New rootlets sprouted from the trunk of Alfheim, which had all its tentacles torn off and burned, and began to take root in the ground. They started to absorb all the surrounding nutrients at an incredible speed. The corpses of the elves, hunted by the villains, were buried in this land, and as all those accumulated nutrients were concentrated in one place, Suho also saw the result. The last fruit was sprouting from Alfheim. Is it trying to give birth to another spirit? Yes, the final enforcer. If that is born, we'll all... Crack! Before Hassel could even finish her sentence, Circa's hand was faster. She grabbed that last fruit and crushed it without hesitation. Don't waste time being born. You're the only one left anyway. Looking back, the blizzard had subsided. Instead, there were 5 giant ice golems standing behind Circa. She had finally succeeded in dominating all the spirits of frost. And the moment she crushed the last fruit that Alfheim created with all its might, boom! What erupted from within wasn't a spirit of frost, but a scream. A terrifying scream, beyond the range of human hearing, exploded in all directions. At that moment, ding! An urgent quest has arrived. Huh? Suho let out a hollow laugh at the sudden quest window. Urgent quest, defeat the enemy. Beings with murderous intent towards the player have surrounded the area. Defeat them all and secure safety. Number of enemies to defeat, 2,000 Haint. Number of enemies defeated. What was with this number? It meant that nearly 3,000 enemies were surrounding him, without emitting any presence. Ah, was it because of the leaves? As the blizzard subsided, winter lifted, and the land returned to autumn. The snow-covered field melted under the flames of destruction, and the red and yellow leaves buried beneath also burned. But even as they turned to ash, those leaves became smoke and covered the sky, still bestowing the effect of perception impairment on this land. Of course, it was only a temporary effect and would soon disappear, but the problem was that there were those who flocked here after hearing Alfheim scream in the meantime. Grining, Suho looked around and couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. On the burning walls, there were 3,000 high elves standing, aiming their bows downwards. And they were high elves whose skin was hardened with bark, their erosion complete. Silad, were high elves always this common? King of the Snowfolk and the Monarch of Frost, clicks his tongue. King of the Snowfolk and the Monarch of Frost explains that they are half-baked high elves forcibly evolved by the contaminated Elvenwood. Those were also the apostles of paradise doing. Just how many flower pots did he create on this land? Meanwhile, Hasul, surrounded by the overwhelming killing intent emitted by the high elves, gripped the scythe of harvest with a determined look. With her other hand, she grabbed the round strawberry cake Suho gave her and took a big bite. Even if this was where she died today, wouldn't it be okay to at least have a bite of strawberry cake before going? But Suho called out to Arsha as if this was a good thing. Arsha? Yes? You called? Buzz. Countless bees flew up from under Suho's shadow as she answered. They gathered in the air, forming Arsha's face adorned with a respectful expression. Hassel flinched at the sight, but took another bite of the cake. She seemed determined to stuff her cheeks, no matter what happened. Suho ordered Arsha, "This is good timing, right? Spread the bees to backtrack their traces, and I'll locate all the Elvenwoods at the end of those traces." They understood each other perfectly. With that answer, Arsha dispersed into countless bees again and flew towards the sky. And those guys? The instance dungeon was already broken because of the Apostle of Paradise, but those high elves were all experience points, weren't they? Suho grinned, revealing his teeth. I was wondering how to find them all. This is perfect. Don't miss a single one. Yes! Suho's shadow army erupted with energy and sprang towards the 3,000 high elves, and in Circa's body, who was facing all those enemies, a change was occurring. Whoosh! A chill began to emanate from her entire body. Chapter 291. Chapter 289. Whoosh! A silent rage dwelled in the chilling wind. It was the anger that Circa felt. The title of High Elf was a legendary feat passed down through oral tradition among ordinary elves. They were the most outstanding guardians among their people. Those who grew and grew, an honorable name given only to the great elves who were even considered candidates for the next monarch. But look at them now. Their true nature lost, eroded by Elvenwood and the spirits. And there were 3,000 of them. There were this many? A chill ran down her spine. Circa felt something that had been stuck in her chest loosen. This emotion had been building up little by little in the depths of her heart every time she encountered high elves while searching for Elvenwoods with Suho. But the moment she faced 3,000 of them at once, the thread of reason that barely held Circa together finally snapped. There were this many. Circa's lips muttered those words over and over again. Wasn't it absurd that so many elves were still alive, and not just ordinary, but high elves. How had they lived until now? The young elves. The babies who lost their parents in the war and struggled to survive. In the sanctuary that lost its king, abandoned and neglected in the harsh cold, they had to worry about survival from the moment they learned to walk. When I was young, I thought it was natural. All those times flashed through Circa's mind like a revolving lantern. The harsh cold from birth. Young elves who had to learn to walk on ice from the moment they were born. There was a time when Circa thought all those moments were her destiny. She thought it was just a normal trial they had to go through because they were born as ice elves. Yes, there was a time, but it wasn't. She realized it wasn't normal. Cha-cha. It was after meeting her that she realized something she didn't know. The existence of parents. That natural and warm something. That they, who were still young and weak, were beings who needed to be cared for. She learned it through her. And only then could she see the empty space the adults left. The absence of the grown-up elves who should have protected and raised them, instead of Cha-Cha. Well, at least, it was okay until then. There was no other way, was there? What could she do? The adults all died in the war, but now it seemed like that wasn't the case. So many. Really, there were too many. Seeing with her own eyes that the high elves, who should have been leading the way and protecting the children who would be the future of their race, were still alive. It was only natural for her to be this angry. Whoosh! The chill that started deep within Circa's heart began to spread in all directions. Its momentum, which was unhurried at first, accelerated rapidly and became as harsh as when the spirits of frost were just born from Alfheim. This wasn't because she dominated the spirits of frost. She felt intense resentment, pure betrayal. She had to become the guardian of the tribe at a young age and protect her friends. And the high elves, who abandoned their duties and fled from the war, appeared before her like this. Or rather, if they were going to appear anyway, they should have appeared in a grand and dignified manner. But they were corrupted by Elvenwood and the spirits, tainted by the power of the outer gods, so pathetic. To appear in such a wretched state, how could she not despise them? How could she not truly look down on them? Spirit cavalry. Crackle, the spirits of frost, whose domination she had just completed, gleamed at Circa's command. Not just spirits, but the nightmare of the elves, the winter itself, transformed into the form of an incomparably solid ice golem, compressed and condensed before Circa's majesty, and rose with a giant body. Rumble. Marching with them, Circa personally vowed, to those unsightly high elves, that she would become their winter. My name is Circa, that she would personally show them all the pain they had suffered. I, the legitimate successor of the king of the snowfolk, the monarch of frost, Silad, declare, she proclaimed, on my grandfather's honor. Spirit armament crackle. That rage swirled and firmly armed Circa's entire figure. Her full body armor gradually grew in size. I strip you all of your qualifications as high elves. No, first of all, you don't even have the right to be elves. A chill permeated every word Circa uttered, filled with suppressed rage. Whoosh! Just die. Circa became winter. Yangpyeong, a secluded valley somewhere in that small country called South Korea, covered in fog. Voom! Suddenly, the mouth of the void opened in the empty air, and what it spat out was none other than the Apostle of Paradise. Is this the place? The Apostle of Paradise, who closed the mouth of the void to conserve energy, frowned and looked around. He couldn't see anything because of the thick fog, but still he smirked. How ironic, Yangpyeong, to think that all of Sung Suho's weaknesses were gathered in this place. Laughter escaped his lips. Even he couldn't go just anywhere. The only places he could access by crossing the dimensional gap using the mouth of the void were those where the outer god's power reached. That was why he was still trying to spread the outer god's cult throughout Earth. But ironically, this place, Yangpyeong, was where the cult was hidden. Of course, it was gone now. But I heard it was recently discovered and destroyed by the Korean Association. The words that Yuri Orlov said when he handed over the information suddenly came to mind. But it didn't matter, especially in this place, Yangpyeong, because the meteorite fell here. The Apostle of Paradise walked through the fog with a meaningful smile. Splash, splash. The footsteps of the Apostle of Paradise, treading on the ground damp from the fog, gradually disappeared into the mist. In the direction he was walking, there was a meteorite. Meteorite. This Yangpyeong was the land where a fragment of a star from outer space crashed. Finding Sung Suho's family and either killing them or taking them hostage was something he would do later. Looking back, the process of infiltrating this dimension while hiding from the sight and senses of the Shadow Army in outer space was extremely difficult and complicated. Currently, all paths leading to this dimension from outer space were tightly guarded by the Shadow Army. But how vast was the universe? Even they couldn't monitor all the meteorites that literally were as numerous as like stars in the universe. The method he attempted was to hide in a meteorite and escape the front line. But there were also tricky conditions attached to this. First of all, it was impossible for an apostle with too much power. Even if they hid in a meteorite, their presence was too great, and they would be immediately discovered by the Shadow Army. But even then, sending an apostle who was too weak was pointless. What could a weakling do, even if he safely arrived here? So this was the strategy he devised, fragmenting his power. To solve the tricky problem of dimensional travel, my main body, which has vast might, fragmented its power and personality and sent it to this world. You fragmented your main body? Then you were originally one being? Yes. Those fragments crossed outer space, hidden in numerous meteorites, and I am one of those fragments. Yuri Orlov, who heard this story before, had to rack his brains to understand it. It was a natural reaction. For an ordinary human living in this barren and insignificant universe to understand the ability to fragment one's existence just by hearing it once was impossible. So Yuri Orlov, who barely grasped the situation, just asked for the conclusion. So you're saying you have to find other meteorites? Yes. The meteorites that were sent would have arrived not only on Earth, but also in other dimensions in this universe. As I find them and absorb the other fragments within, I gradually regain my original power. How do you find those meteorites? We are already looky, nong for each other. Even if we don't know where we are, since we have the same goal, we'll eventually meet. Then what can I help you with? There seem to be many religions on this land. Create a religion that worships our gods, Itarim, among them, and spread it widely. Oh, you're saying to create a cult? That's a blasphemous expression. You've already experienced my divine power, haven't you? Anyway, that's enough. Those with Itarim's divinity can recognize each other. So, are you saying that you're going to merge with each other just like that? That's something we can decide after we meet. We can merge anytime. But since even our personalities are fragmented, if we decide it's better to act separately, there's no need to become one again. The important thing is to not be discovered by him. Who is he? You don't need to know. The Apostle of Paradise continued to walk through the fog, recalling the conversation he had with Yuri Orlov. The reason he didn't answer Yuri Orlov's last question was trivial, because the Shadow Monarch, whom he feared and was wary of, happened to be the same human race as him. If Yuri Orlov knew that fact, he would surely become arrogant, and he didn't want to see that unsightly reaction. I'm sure the meteorite was around here. The Apostle of Paradise searched for the meteorite. He was sure it was nearby, but it was difficult to pinpoint the exact location when he got this close. It was because he absorbed most of the power hidden in that meteorite when he found this place before. At that time, it was the early days of establishing the Outer Gods cult, so he entered a nearby gate, captured demons, and built a factory to research stardust. And he left a tiny bit of power in the meteorite for that research. But he wasn't worried, even though he couldn't find it after searching for some time. A meteorite from outer space was just a rock after all. Even if the Outer Gods cult was destroyed, no one would care about the meteorite. Besides, the fact that he could already connect a dimensional gap to this place was proof that the meteorite still existed here. Found it. The Apostle of Paradise, finally finding the remains of the meteorite that arrived in Yangpyeong, grinned, revealing his teeth, and he absorbed the last remaining power within. Good. He had an ecstatic expression as he slowly melted the fragment of power that merged with him into his body. Crackle. As he sucked out even the last remaining drop of power, the meteorite finally crumbled. But even then, this rock was useful. The material that made it up was from the dimension where the Apostle of Paradise lived, so it was the medium that reacted best to his power. In some ways, it was an even more suitable fertilizer for divine power than the star piece. Whoosh! As soon as his words fell, the fruit he was holding began to take root in the damp ground at a terrifying speed, using the meteorite as fertilizer. Swoosh! The Apostle of Paradise. The fragmented personality and ability from his main body, true to the name he gave himself, was to turn this planet into his own paradise. Sung Suho. This Yangpyeong, where your family is gathered, will now become my flower pot. He smiled meaningfully and began to gradually contaminate Yangpyeong, turning it into a new terrarium. However, there was one fact he didn't know, and the answer was in the words he once said to Yuri Orlov. Those with Itarim's divinity can recognize each other. The moment the Apostle of Paradise arrived in Yangpyeong through the dimensional gap, the moment he used his divine power to sprout a new elvenwood in Yangpyeong, his father, who had been living in this land, sensed that presence. Chapter 292, Chapter 290. Beyond the thick fog, the erosion began in earnest. Whoosh! The Apostle of Paradise leisurely strolled through the fog, indiscriminately scattering seeds. The scattered grains burrowed into the ground, and the pristine forest of Yangpyeong began to change. Stretch, stretch. The clean soil gradually turned dark purple and began to become sticky like flesh, and the roots of elvenwood spread like blood vessels. Squelch, squelch, squelch. Shoots sprouting from the ground began to entwine everything around them. Tree trunks wriggled and grew grotesquely. It was a form that could no longer be called a tree. It moved and grew on its own like a living creature. This will become my new paradise. Rustle. Dirty mycelium covered the forest. It spread like a spider web, infecting everything around it. Trees, grass, stones, even the air. Everything gradually transformed into a form familiar to the Apostle of Paradise. I offer all this to my great god's Itarim. Wherever his footsteps touched, the pristine nature of Yangpyeong turned into that of the outer universe. Swoosh! Sprouts of elvenwood began to emerge here and there in the humid fog. They grew at an astonishingly fast pace, changing the surrounding scenery in an instant. The healthy pine trees rotted away, infected by the roots of elvenwood, and the rotten forest became nutrients for elvenwood. The small animals that played in it began to mutate into hideous magical beasts. This is good. The Apostle of Paradise took in the familiar air and grinned wickedly at the edge of the paradise he created. This was progressing at a much faster pace than when he created flower pots in other places. It showed how eager he was, how enraged he was at Suho, who humiliated him. It was then, humans? A completely different scene came into the Apostle of Paradise's view. For some reason, that place alone felt brightly lit. Uni, look at this. Wow, it's a pretty flower. Me too, me too. Giggles. Bright laughter. He could see children playing and chatting cheerfully. Children were smiling brightly in a spacious, beautifully decorated garden. Their innocent laughter echoed in the clear sky that hadn't been eroded yet. An orphanage. This is perfect. The Apostle of Paradise's eyes gleamed as he spotted the place while walking from afar. When he first arrived on Earth, he wasn't interested in the human race at all. What was the point of knowing what kind of ecosystem was on this planet? He would just kill them all and melt them into a handful of mana. All he had to do was erode and contaminate the plant and turn it into the familiar ecosystem he lived in. But while staying with Yuri Orlov in Russia, he happened to notice something. Family. A concept that didn't exist in their universe but did in the human world. The concept of family was a very unfamiliar culture to the Apostle of Paradise. If he had to compare, Itarim, who created him, was closer to a parent, but it was fundamentally different from the human concept. First of all, humans didn't worship and serve the parents who created them as gods, and their parents didn't annihilate their creations for disobeying orders. That was quite curious and unsettling at the same time. And then he discovered humans who were abandoned by their parents. Creatures abandoned by their god? Wasn't it familiar? A fragmented soul, driven to the battlefield by God's orders, fighting and having its personality and abilities torn apart, sent to another dimension. That was the state of the Apostle of Paradise himself. So he couldn't help but feel a sense of familiarity with orphaned children who lost their parents. Perhaps when he first discovered Yuri Orlov in Russia, the reason why he readily cooperated with that human's obvious and blatant desire was also because of that. Yuri Orlov was also an orphan, so he was drawn to the source of his deprived desire. But as he observed human behavior more while staying with Yuri Orlov, there was something he couldn't understand the most. It was the orphanage. For some reason, humans gathered and managed creatures who lost or were abandoned by their parents in one place, under the pretense of protecting and caring for them. It was truly an unsettling and useless act. Okay, everyone, stop playing and come inside. It's lunchtime. Yay, what are we having today? Curry pork cutlet. Really, yay. Wow. A peaceful scene, as if painted in a picture, unfolded before his eyes. It was truly unsettling. But the Apostle of Paradise knew now that it was all just a facade. His impression of visiting various orphanages in Russia, well, they acted peaceful on the surface, but behind the scenes, most of them were groups trying to fulfill the adults' desires by exploiting the children, and the souls of the orphans trapped inside were delicious prey. Gulp. The Apostle of Paradise, slowly approaching the Yangpyeong Child Protection Center, swallowed his saliva with a meaningful expression. Souls with great deficiencies, souls distorted by suppressed desires, were the perfect ingredients for his soldiers. Whoosh! Following his footsteps, the trees in the forest rotted away, and the earth crumbled. That thick darkness was slowly approaching to cover the laughter of those poor souls pretending to be happy. It was then. Uni, look, another flower bloomed. A girl in the garden in front of the building was pointing in this direction with a smile. Her finger pointed at the Apostle of Paradise. More precisely, at the otherworldly flowers blooming behind him. Although they seemed to be called elvenwood on this planet, in the universe where he lived, such creatures were classified as predatory plants. The Apostle of Paradise was now standing before the girl, who tilted her head at his smile. Who are you? Would you like to eat this? Instead of answering, the Apostle of Paradise held out a tempting red fruit to the girl. Yangpyeong, a natural wonder where the greenery of the trees and the hazy fog intertwined. There was a man sitting in meditation with his eyes closed on a steep cliff. An elderly man. Blue gems the size of fists were embedded all over his body, where gray hair was sparsely growing. Star pieces. The alien energy emanating from those gems, where the mana of the outer universe was highly concentrated, were both a curse and a blessing to this man. He could use the foreign energy through this medium, but in return, that tremendous power was gradually eroding his body. Crack, crack, crack. Tremendous dimensional pressure. Because of that, his skin and muscles were precariously close to being torn apart. The numerous star pieces embedded in his body were wriggling, trying to create dimensional cracks in him. But endure. He had to endure. This power was forcibly implanted in him, so suppressing those cracks was also his responsibility. Exhale. Muscles that were swollen as if about to rip apart. A body absurdly developed for an old man. And above all, he possessed the experience to handle this alien energy skillfully, unlike a human. Yes, he was skilled, inhumanly so. There was a reason why this was possible, because this wasn't his first time. Accepting this tremendous power that a human couldn't handle into his body. No, he once even had to forcefully cram an even more absurd power into this feeble body, to protect his son, risking his life. So I can do it this time as well. Sung Jinwoo gritted his teeth. His vessel was sufficient. He knew the trick. All he was doing now was retracing the path of hardship he had experienced in the past. Although the pain in the process was unavoidable, it was theoretically possible. I will definitely succeed. Rumble. Void Gate. A door leading to the dimensional gap was open right behind him, who was sitting in meditation. He knew that if he took just one step beyond that, this pain that was tearing him apart would disappear like melting snow, because he was safe inside the dimensional gap. But before that one step, deliberately enduring all this pressure and pain throughout his being was a kind of training, enduring the suffering and increasing his body's durability, pushing himself to the limit until his muscles tore, torturing his soul until his vessel was about to break, and after enduring all that, growing one step at a time. In short, it was strength training. Strain, exhale, crack, snap. Sung Ilwan was deliberately drawing the mana of the outer universe into his body and torturing himself. Of course, this was a secret he kept from his family. If they knew he was doing something this dangerous, they would definitely try to stop him. But he had to do it. The war was over, but new enemies had appeared, and those foes were much stronger than before. Just like back then, his son was still fighting all those enemies alone, to protect everyone. Of course, he knew. His son was all grown up now. It was absurd how much he had matured, to the point where he didn't need any help or advice from his father anymore. His son had grown into a fine adult, and before he knew it, he had even become a father himself. But what difference did that make? Despite all that, he was still his son, and I am his father. No matter how grown up his son was there any father in the world who would just stand by and watch as his son risked his life fighting? If his son struggled to protect the world, I will protect my son, as always, even if it meant risking his own life, so I will definitely make this power mine. It was then, flash. Sung Ilwan, who was meditating peacefully before the void gate, suddenly opened his eyes. Something had changed. The air felt different. Somewhere beyond the fog, he could feel the dimensional wall rippling. It was an instinctive sensation, not a skill or anything. The star pieces embedded in his body were buzzing. They were screaming. What is this? Sung Ilwan, feeling the change, looked beyond the fog with a fearsome expression. It felt ominous yet familiar, as if something had suddenly appeared from beyond. Who is it? Who has appeared? He didn't know the identity, but he could say with absolute certainty. Whoever it was, judging from how happy the star pieces were, they were definitely not on humanity's side. I'll find you myself. His contemplation was brief. Sung Ilwan jumped off the cliff without hesitation. Chapter 293, Chapter 291. Whoosh! The strong wind hit his body. Sung Ilwan, jumping off the cliff, fell endlessly through the white mist. But there was no tremor in his eyes as he plummeted at a terrifying speed. Far from being scared, he didn't even feel the need to use magic power for something like this. He had been through much worse in the past. It started with being left behind, a world forgotten by everyone now. Beyond that vanished history, he was a hunter who awakened in the early days of the Cataclysm. It was a time when the term hunter hadn't even been properly established. A time when the hunter rank system wasn't properly defined yet. Sometimes, when he recalled those days, he wondered, what rank was he back then? At that time, no awakened being in the world could measure their power, because the magic power meter hadn't been developed yet. Perhaps that was why everyone was so reckless back then. Because they didn't know the extent of their power. They jumped into unknown gates, trying to conquer dangerous dungeons that might hold unknown threats. And sometimes, if they encountered a high-difficulty area, they lost their lives absurdly quickly. But looking back, these were romantic times. Reckless courage that was possible because they couldn't gauge their own strength. They jumped into the unknown with the sole mission of protecting the world. And then the gate closed, and I was left alone in the dungeon, left behind, isolated. The rulers appeared before him as he wandered aimlessly, trapped in the dimensional gap. The mission given to him after that, it didn't matter now that it was all in the past. The problem was what came after. He was luckily helped by the rulers and returned to Earth, but he had already become a terrible head of family, because of his disappearance, because of his reckless courage to save the world. His wife, Park Kyung-hae, lost her husband overnight, and his children, Sung Jinwoo and Sung Jina, lost their father. And soon after, his wife fell into eternal slumber and was hospitalized in the intensive care unit, unconscious. Suddenly, his children became orphans who lost both parents. They were struggling to survive in that dangerous world at such a young age. His son even gave up going to college to earn money. I was a terrible father and a terrible husband. Perhaps that was why he fought even harder to protect his son, burdened with guilt and a sense of debt. But now, the history of that time has become a thing of the past, a fragment of history lost to the world. But even so, how could he forget? He, the terrible husband and father, had to remember. The guilt, helplessness, and the weight of being an irresponsible head of the household were still deeply embedded in Sung Ilwan's heart. That's why. This time, I will protect them, definitely. At least in this world, he wouldn't repeat the mistakes of the past. With that resolve, Sung Jinwoo ran through the foggy forest with a fearsome expression. Meanwhile, the Apostle of Paradise, who handed the fruit to the girl, couldn't help but be bewildered, a mouth-watering scent. The greater the deficiency in the soul, the more this fruit stimulated their hunger. The most terrifying aspect of predatory plants was that they emitted an irresistible magic power to those whose souls were starved. But even then, I don't want it. What? Pause. For a moment, the Apostle of Paradise wondered if he misheard. But he wasn't mistaken. The girl's eyes didn't waver even with the fruit of elvenwood before her. The director told me not to eat food from strangers. Such an obvious statement. She was a smart child. But the Apostle of Paradise felt like his brain had short-circuited. How? How could such a young and weak human, and even a deficient soul that lost its parents, resist the temptation of a predatory plant? Anyway, if you're a guest, please go to the director's office. I have to go eat curry pork cutlet now. But the Apostle of Paradise was momentarily flustered as the girl turned her back without hesitation and ran towards the dining hall. Actually, if he wanted to, he could just grab the girl by the scruff of her neck, force her mouth open, and feed her the fruit. But he had an ominous feeling. How could a creature trapped in an orphanage resist the temptation of a predatory plant? Wait, director? Who is that? Yes. The girl, who was running to the dining hall, turned her head at the question from behind and looked at his face again. Her eyes, which were firm when she refused the fruit, were now sparkling. You're asking who the director is? But the question itself was too out of context. The girl suddenly fell into deep thought. But she tried to answer the guest's question with a serious expression. She was hungry, but he was a guest who came to the orphanage. So our director, she's Besides, children naturally liked to teach others about things they liked. Especially since the director who created this place was her favorite grandmother, she was confident she could answer anything anyone asked about her. So our director, her only son, suddenly went missing a long time ago. Well, it's not really a special story. Everyone runs away from home once or twice when they're in middle school, right? No, that's not what No, but listen. Our director had a really hard time trying to find her son back then, but in the end, her son came back home on his own. After 2 years? Isn't that amazing? Even for the Apostle of Paradise, it was impossible to stop the chatterbox girl once she started talking. It would be easier to just kill her, but the problem was the girl's soul. He was confused. His hand was still frozen, holding out the fruit before her. But the girl didn't even glance at the fruit. Does she really have no deficiency? Strange. Wasn't she too bright for a creature trapped in a mere orphanage? Seeing such a pure soul before his eyes, the Apostle of Paradise couldn't help but listen to the girl's chatter in a trance. And perhaps because she was also hungry, she was rattling on like a machine gun to get to the dining hall quickly. Besides, running away from home wasn't a big deal, but to think that the child who ran away came back on their own was truly amazing. So to stop this girl's excited chatter, it seemed like it would be easier to just rip her head off. Anyway then, since the director was so eager to find her son, she went around looking for runaway teens, and even after her son came back, children like us kept catching her eye. So she eventually created this place, the Yangpyeong Child Protection Center. Ta-da! The girl smiled brightly at the Apostle of Paradise with a satisfied expression as if she had finished her introduction perfectly. Ah, right, and our director's name is Park Kyung-hae. That human's name. Suddenly, the Apostle of Paradise's expression hardened at those words, and then his lips slowly curled up. Wait, did you just say Park Kyung-hae? Yes, Park Kyung-hae. Anyway, we're done now, right? If you don't have any more questions, I'm really going to eat now. Then this fruit. Ah, I said no. Dada. The girl turned her back without hesitation and ran towards the dining hall after finishing what she had to say. But unlike before, the Apostle of Paradise had a bright smile on his face. What a coincidence. Truly a coincidence. Now he didn't care about that girl's soul anymore, because he had found much better prey. Yangpyeong Child Protection Center. Park Kyung-hae. Weren't those names from the information Yuri Orlov gave him? I'll start here. He planted the fruit he was going to feed the girl in the garden of this orphanage, and he poured a tremendous amount of divine power into this land. Whoosh! The land was quickly contaminated, and the sprout of a predatory plant emerged and bloomed. The clean soil gradually turned dark purple, and the roots of elvenwood began to spread like blood vessels. At that moment, he staggered. Kook, Sung Suho, that basta. Rid. The Apostle of Paradise staggered from a sudden dizziness. Sung Suho, what was that bastard doing in North Korea right now? He could feel the flower pots remaining there rapidly falling silent, and the power flowing from those flower pots inevitably weakened. The Apostle of Paradise gritted his teeth with a ferocious expression. I need to hurry. Now it was a race against time, whether his base would be destroyed first, or whether he would destroy his enemy's base before that, but it was still okay for now. His flower pots were spread not only in North Korea but also in other countries. However, all of his enemy's family was gathered in this land, wasn't it? Yangpyeong Child Protection Center. Standing before it, the Apostle of Paradise unleashed tremendous divine power and roared, Grow elvenwood! Whoosh! He decided to sacrifice this entire orphanage to the new elvenwood. If you burn everything I have, I'll turn all your family into toys. Squelch, squelch, he had to hurry. He accelerated the erosion. Starting from the orphanage, with the Apostle of Paradise as the center, the surrounding area began to rapidly transform. Tree branches wriggled and grew grotesquely, and those hideous branches spread like spider webs, intertwining and forming a nest-like structure around the orphanage's garden. Meanwhile, the Apostle of Paradise entered the building to find Park Kyung-hee. Noisy chatter could be heard from the dining hall. Wow, did you make this curry yourself, Director? This is amazing. Grandma Director's kimchi is the best. The Apostle of Paradise's eyes flashed. An elderly woman with the children. It was Director Park Kyung-hee. An old granny, looking exactly like the picture of Sung Suho's grandmother that Yuri Orlov gave him, was gathered in the dining hall with the children. He flicked his finger towards that place. Whoosh! The roots of elvenwood pierced through the dining hall floor and sprouted. Ooh-wah! Whoa! What is this? The screams of the startled children filled the dining hall. In the center of it all, Park Kyung-hee was floating in the air, bound by the hideous roots. Director! Director, look out! The children clung to the roots, trying to save her. But Park Kyung-hee, not caring about her own safety, worried about the children's well-being first. Kids, run away! No, we can't leave you, Director. The children cried and gathered even closer. They were also caught and entangled in the roots, but still struggled to save their protector. Director Park Kyung-hee was that precious to them. The one who made them warm meals every morning, stayed by their side all night when they were sick, and hugged them when they were sad. For the children who were left alone without parents, Park Kyung-hee was everything. Ah, report it. Someone call the association if you have a phone. In the midst of the panic, one of the smart kids shouted, and one of the children, caught in the roots, struggled and took out his phone from his pocket. Thud. Of course, that attempt was futile. With a single gesture from the Apostle of Paradise, the roots struck the child's hand and made him drop the phone. I don't need any interference. The Apostle of Paradise smiled leisurely and walked across the contaminated land. From now on, it's my time. And he approached Park Kyung-hee, who was entangled in the roots, and held out a new red fruit before her face. Eat this. Who? He didn't care about Park Kyung-hee's answer, bewildered as she looked at him, because the course of events was already decided. If you don't eat this fruit now, I'll kill all the children here. Park Kyung-hee's face was instantly filled with terror, and the Apostle of Paradise became overjoyed, but he knew how to make it even more delightful. No, wait, instead of killing them, I'll cut off their limbs one by one, first the fingers, then the arms, and I'll eat it! Please stop! He finally got the answer he wanted from Park Kyung-hee. Yes, eat it, you're G. Us to human without magic power anyway, so one fruit should be enough. And just like the villains of North Korea, this woman would also become a beautiful sprout growing in his flower pot. The Apostle of Paradise grinned wickedly, forced Park Kyung-hee's mouth open, and brought the fruit closer. He was filled with anticipation. What kind of expression would Sung-soo, that detestable guy, make when he saw his grandmother turned into his toy? But it was then... Shiver. Just as he was about to feed Park Kyung-hae the fruit, his body instinctively recoiled. Crash! At that moment, a man, descending like lightning and breaking through the ceiling of the dining hall, blocked their path. Honey? Sung Il-won, he tore off the roots with his overwhelming strength and held Park Kyung-hae in his arms. Chapter 294, Chapter 292, Sung Il-won, who narrowly saved his wife, quickly checked on her. I'm not too late. Fortunately, his wife was safe. It was truly fortunate. Sung Il-won was so relieved that he felt his strength leave him, but it was too early to relax. Who are you? His gaze, flickering with emotion, glared at the Apostle of Paradise as he asked. At the same time, Sung Il-won had to desperately suppress the magic power that felt like it would explode from within him, to prevent his unrefined energy from having a negative impact on his wife. She was already sensitive to magic power, having suffered from eternal sleep disease in the previous world, so he had to desperately suppress this rage that felt like it would explode at any moment. But contrary to his heart's wishes, his anger was slowly leaking from his body. Crack! Crack! Your body. Park Kyung-hae's eyes widened as she checked his condition. All over her husband's skin, cracks were forming as if about to split open, centered on the star pieces embedded in his body. Even to Park Kyung-hae, who knew nothing about magic power, Sung Il-won's body looked as dangerous as a glass bead about to shatter. No, a bomb about to explode. But Sung Il-won tried to soothe his wife with a calm and composed expression. Don't worry, you don't have to worry about anything. I'm here now. Yes, everything was fine, because his wife was safe. He wasn't too late this time. Relieved, Sung Il-won turned his gaze to the Apostle of Paradise and asked again, Can't you speak? I just asked who you are. If you're curious about who I am, tell me who you are first. What? Grinding. The Apostle of Paradise asked Sung Il-won a question instead of answering. Despite having an important moment interrupted, the Apostle of Paradise wasn't angry at all. Rather, he was smiling, very brightly. This was good, wasn't it? The face of that interrupter happened to be in the family photo of Sung Suho from the documents he received from Yuri Orlov. Sung Il-won, Sung Suho's grandfather. But even though he recognized his face and name at a glance, the Apostle of Paradise still asked about his identity. He wasn't asking Sung Il-won as a human. He didn't expect an answer in the first place. The state of his body already gave him the confirmation. Crack, crack. Even now, the star pieces embedded in Sung Il-won's body were resonating with a blue light, reacting to the mana of the outer universe emanating from the Apostle of Paradise. I never imagined to think there was a high priest of the cult of the outer gods among Sung Suho's family. What did you just say? Sung Il-won's expression instantly hardened, and he bared his teeth with a fearsome voice. Whose family? Did you come here after our Suho? Our Suho. Interesting. Truly interesting. The Apostle of Paradise just smiled, even receiving his anger head-on, and he licked his lips, scanning his body with snake-like eyes. 23 star pieces, and perfect assimilation. To think such a perfect vessel was hidden in a secluded place like this. High priest level. How could he not drool after finding someone like this? But regardless of his reaction, Sung Il-won's entire focus was on his wife. In fact, he also needed confirmation. He didn't ask because he was curious about the Apostle of Paradise's identity. Apostle of Outer Gods. I am not a high priest. No, you are a high priest, and a very well-refined vessel. I've never seen one as perfect as you. Sung Il-won's answer didn't matter to him. The Apostle of Paradise smiled brightly and reached out his hand. He introduced himself proudly. So worship me. My name is the Apostle of Paradise, the Apostle of the Gods you will now serve. At that moment, whoosh! Kyuk! Sung Il-won barely resisted the intangible pressure. Following the Apostles of Paradise gesture, the star pieces embedded throughout his body were suddenly pulled forward. Like a puppet with strings attached, his body was trying to move against his will. It felt like invisible threads were connected from each of the star pieces to the Apostle's hand. As Sung Il-won gritted his teeth and resisted that force, the Apostle of Paradise chuckled as if mocking him. How cute. Just submit. It's not a power a mere creature can resist. From the beginning, the star pieces embedded in your body were planted for this moment. The situation was completely different from Hasul in North Korea, who was holding a scythe made from an outer god's stone. From the priest level or higher in the cult of the outer gods, they directly implanted star pieces into their bodies like Sung Jinwoo. It was to directly control them as puppets like this. Since you didn't know because the temple here disappeared, I'll tell you the truth. That power embedded in your body is a device to make you my faithful puppet, so obey. That is your sole purpose, the mission bestowed upon you by the great Itarim. Whoosh! The intangible pressure intensified with those words. But Sung Jinwoo gritted his teeth, forced a smile, and retorted, "Nonsense." Kaboom! He unleashed the blue energy from his entire body, resisting the force, and at the same time, he swung the dagger in his hand and slashed in all directions. Shatter! The invisible intangible force was cut. Now! The Apostle of Paradise's eyes widened in surprise at that sight. He realized you weren't just a simple high priest. What have you done to your body? He was astonished. What kind of training did Sung Jinwoo go through? He had already reached the level of completely controlling the mana of the outer universe, not just passively receiving it. Slash! 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 Taking advantage of the Apostles of Paradise momentary surprise, Sung Jinwoo quickly swung his dagger and cut all the roots that were entangling the orphans in the dining hall and shouted, "Gather around!" Thud, thud, Grandpa! As the roots binding their bodies were cut, the children became free and rushed towards Sung Jinwoo, and as if finally relieved, they began to cry their eyes out. They had mustered their courage to protect their director just moments ago, but they were still children after all. A situation like this was terrifying even for adults. The whole world had literally turned into hell in an instant, and in the center of that hell, Sung Jinwoo stood tall, holding his daggers to protect his wife and the children. The Apostle of Paradise grumbled with hurt pride at the tip of that blade. Seriously, how dare you reject my control? None of you, listen to me. But he wasn't disappointed. No, rather, it was better this way. In any case, that human's body was already heavily saturated with the mana of the outer universe. And to think he had worked so hard to get used to that mana, to the point of resisting even his control, perfectly adapting to the power. This changes things. He was even curious. What kind of experiments did he have to go through to refine a high priest-level body to that state? If he knew that method, wouldn't he be able to create such vessels over and over again? The Apostle of Paradise made up his mind. This is perfect. Now I see that it's better for me to use that body myself than to simply take you as a soldier. As it happened, he was currently in a makeshift human body, which was uncomfortable, so a vessel like that was more than perfect for him to use. I've decided. You will be my new vessel from now on, so prove your faith with death. Whoosh! The Apostle of Paradise suddenly charged towards Sung Jinwoo, unleashing tremendous divine power. Don't even try. Sung Jinwoo swung his daggers and counterattacked, but the Apostle of Paradise was cunning. Struggle as much as you want, while protecting those humans. Crackle! The Apostle of Paradise collapsed the ceiling of the dining hall above their heads, targeting his wife and the orphanage children that Sung Jinwoo was protecting. They screamed in surprise as concrete debris poured down from above. Sung Jinwoo hurriedly changed the direction of his attack, destroying and deflecting the falling concrete debris one by one. Good move. I'm even more tempted now. Meanwhile, the Apostle of Paradise spread his divine power like a net, tightening it around Sung Jinwoo from all directions. Try enduring this. If you dodge, do you think those guys will be safe? Kuk! Even though he knew the Apostle's obvious trick, Sung Jinwoo couldn't back down. As he said, his wife and the orphanage children were in danger if they even touched his mana. With this much concentrated energy, an ordinary human could be burned to death just by brushing against it. In the end, there was only one choice he could make, to not retreat a single step and cut down all of his divine power. Slash! 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 Ka! Good. The more Sung Jinwoo resisted, the more the Apostle of Paradise rejoiced. Rather, he was excited. That vessel would eventually become his. If his soul dwelled in that body, how much stronger could he become? To handle the mana flowing in from the outer universe, he needed a large and sturdy vessel that could withstand that power. With a vessel of this level, I might be able to withstand power similar to my main body, even without finding and gathering all the fragments. Under the sky, wide open from the collapsed ceiling, the apostle of an outer gods, emitting brilliant divine power from above, pressured Sung Jinwoo even more intensely. Worship and praise God. Prove your faith. That is your only value. At the same time, he also attacked from behind. Just like the net of divine power covering the sky, the situation underground was the same. Wasn't this land already covered in a web of roots from the predatory plant he sown? He didn't even have to gesture. He could just do this if he wanted to. Crack! Kia! Suddenly, a root sprouted from the ground and entangled the girl who had the first conversation with the Apostle of Paradise. Sung Jinwoo's gaze turned towards the child. And the moment his daggers changed direction to cut the root, whoosh! Countless other roots sprouted from the ground and attacked the orphanage children. Oh no, it was a crisis. He didn't have enough hands to protect everyone. Sung Jinwoo was desperately defending without even having the chance to attack the Apostle of Paradise. The situation was flowing exactly as the enemy planned. Meanwhile, the divine power emanating from the Apostle of Paradise changed from a net-like form into chains, binding Sung Jinwoo's body like shackles. Krah! Got you! It was at the moment when the Apostle of Paradise, finally capturing Sung Jinwoo, had a triumphant expression. Crackle! Before he could even finish his sentence, the sky split open. Flash! A blinding light. Azure thunderbolts rained down from the open ceiling. The tree roots attacking the children turned to ash and disappeared from that powerful lightning. The Apostle of Paradise's eyes widened at the incredible sight. On the other hand, Sung Jinwoo's face was filled with relief and joy rather than surprise. Have you arrived? Whirl. White flames and a giant shadow loomed over them above the dazzling lightning bolts that struck down. Above the open ceiling, the shadow wyvern Kaisel, spreading its giant black wings, roared, and a woman stood atop it, holding the Demon King's longsword downwards. Sorry I'm late, father. No, you arrived just in time, my daughter-in-law. A smile appeared on Sung Jinwoo's lips. Thanks to his dependable daughter-in-law, he could now focus solely on the battle. Snap, snap, snap! Now this is the real deal. He broke the chains of divine power that bound his body. But the Apostles of Paradise reaction was strange. No way. Looking up and seeing Cha Hae-in, he had a terrified expression. No, he wasn't looking at her. How can this be? Rather, his wide eyes were fixed on the shadow wyvern Kaisel that Cha Hae-in was riding, and the identity of the familiar yet terrifying energy emanating from it. The Apostle of Paradise could tell at a glance that this shadow soldier wasn't like the ones he encountered in North Korea with Sung Suho. No, that can't be. Don't tell me he is really on Earth. He was in a panic. Chapter 295. Chapter 293, Itarim were gods. They were fickle and destructive beings who could create or destroy a universe at will. There was not just one, but dozens of them. The one who was single-handedly holding back numerous great outer gods was the shadow monarch, Sung Jinwoo. On the other hand, who was the Apostle of Paradise? He was merely a creation who had briefly seen him from afar in the universe. That's why the Apostle of Paradise never overestimated himself. For a creation to survive, it was essential to know its place. That was the secret to a long life. Therefore, he never dared to entertain the crazy thought of facing the shadow monarch. The moment he caught his eye would be the moment he died. In the end, the best he could do was fight the shadow monarch's foot soldiers according to his level. But what was this? How can he be here? He couldn't believe it even though he saw it. How could the shadow monarch's soldier come all the way to this remote planet? Especially since a high-ranking one like this had arrived on Earth, it meant that the shadow monarch himself was also here. Then the war? What happened to the war? Don't tell me they lost? No, that couldn't be. The Itarim were gods, and there were many of them. For anyone to win in a war against the allied forces of so many great beings was an unimaginable scenario. But then what is this soldier? How did it cross outer space? He didn't know. He really didn't know. Despite trying to deny it, an ominous thought kept creeping in. He wanted to believe it wasn't true, but the evidence was clear before his eyes. The Shadow Monarch's power, deeply embedded in the Shadow Wyvern Kaisel. Faced with that terrifying energy, The Apostle of Paradise's mind was thrown into a turmoil of despair and fear. He hadn't even panicked when he found the Shadow Monarch's son in North Korea. He wasn't this flustered even when he learned that his son had inherited a similar power, because it was just a skill. Although it was outstanding for a human, it was nothing compared to the Shadow Monarch he had personally witnessed and experienced. But he couldn't help but panic when he saw his son using not only the shadow power, but also other unknown forces. The sight of him using the power of the rulers, who were on the same side as the Shadow Monarch, was unimaginable. But even then, it wasn't as terrifying as this moment. He thought he could handle it if he somehow gathered all his fragments and recovered his main body's power. But in the midst of this confusion, not knowing how things were going, the Apostle of Paradise's body was already moving on survival instinct alone. Mouth of the void. Bang! The Apostle of Paradise immediately retreated and tore a dimensional gap in the air. Sung Il-hwan didn't matter anymore. A mere human, Sung Suho's family didn't matter. If it was true that the Shadow Monarch himself had descended on this land, escaping from here before being discovered was the priority. He had to survive to fight another day. The dimension finally split open, and the infinite universe was revealed. The dimensional gap. The Apostle of Paradise threw himself into that vast emptiness without hesitation. But, you think I'll let you escape? Whoosh! The Apostle of Paradise's eyes widened. Sung Il-hwan had also jumped in, chasing right after him. You foolish human! The Apostle of Paradise was truly dumbfounded by his reckless behavior. Did that guy really think he was running away out of fear? He definitely didn't know how dangerous it was to cross the dimensional gap. If you lost your way here, you would wander through the universe forever and die, especially a mere human who didn't even have flower pots planted here and there like him. But Sung Il-hwan was focused on only one thing: hunting. I can't let the bastard who targeted my family escape. Sung Il-hwan fiercely chased after him, swinging 2 daggers. Slash! 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 Blue light poured out from the star pieces, embedded throughout his bee. Odie, that energy dyed the 2 daggers a bluish color, and the concentrated blue energy mercilessly slashed at the Apostle of Paradise, who had fled into the dimensional gap. What the? He shuddered. Irrespective of the level of strength, it was because that sight was too familiar. 2 daggers, cold eyes that resembled someone, the magic power exploding and covering his entire body. All of it resembled him too much. How dare you? The Apostle of Paradise gritted his teeth. Anger surged as he realized he was instinctively intimidated by a mere human. How dare you imitate him? Kaboom! Divine power exploded from the Apostle of Paradise, engulfing the dimensional gap, and that tremendous energy blocked Sung Il-hwan's attack. It bound his body from all directions like before. Flash! The star pieces embedded in Sung Il-hwan's body cried in unison. His body shuddered as if it was about to be torn apart. His star pieces were trying to submit to that divine power and become puppets themselves. But Sung Il-hwan gritted his teeth and suppressed that instinct. This much. Crack! 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 The more he endured, the closer his body was to shattering. Cracks spread like spiderwebs across his skin, and blood gushed out. But Sung Il-hwan, as if trying to enjoy that pain, forced a smile and twisted his lips upwards. This much isn't enough. And he continued to swing his daggers. Whiz! 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 The blue trails he unleashed clashed madly with the enemy attacks in the air. The Apostle of Paradise mocked him. You fool! This is my domain. Your power can't reach. But whiz! 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 It reached him. Crack! Before he could even finish his sentence, his defense shattered. The Apostle of Itarim couldn't help but be shocked. His divine power, helplessly shattered by the endless attacks, and Sung Il-hwan breaking through that power with terrible madness and charging straight towards him. How? You said I have 23 star pieces embedded in my body? Sung Il-hwan grinned, revealing his teeth. Earlier, he was desperately defending to protect his wife and the children, but originally, a hunter was not about defense, but offense, one who chased and hunted prey. Thank you, I'll put them to good use. In that sense, Sung Il-hwan was a true hunter, and he was even the most experienced hunter in this world, excluding his son. Flash! You insolent thing! Know your place! The Apostle of Paradise condensed his divine power and blocked his daggers. He glared at him, gritting his teeth. Don't be mistaken. Do you think I'm running away because I'm afraid of you? Whoosh! Suddenly, a net of divine power, centered on the Apostle of Paradise who blocked the attacks, swallowed Sung Il-hwan's body. There was no time to dodge. Unlike before, the opponent was right in front of him. Blame your foolishness for following me all the way here. Since he had already escaped to the dimensional gap, he could relax for a while. Even the Shadow Monarch wouldn't be able to easily find him in this chaotic space. So, as he originally planned, he decided to take over Sung Il-hwan's body. This was a chance for a reversal. Even the Shadow Monarch wouldn't act rashly if his father was taken hostage. Crack! Crack! Koke! Sung Il-hwan's expression distorted as he was enveloped in the outer god's divine power. Thump! 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 His heart was pounding madly from the resonance of the star pieces. Submit, obey, and worship. Your body will now be my vessel. A grotesque smile appeared on the Apostle of Paradise's face as he shouted like a fanatic. This vessel. Sung Il-hwan's lips twisted upwards. He glared at the Apostle of Paradise's crazed eyes and spoke. This vessel already contained the power of a being far greater than you a long time ago. What nonsense. I died back then. Whoosh. Sung Il-hwan's eyes were now calm, and so was the energy that was raging within him, but the Apostle of Paradise was too bewildered to notice the change. Rumble. Ruler? The Apostle of Paradise's eyes shook violently. He finally realized it. Sung Il-hwan wasn't an ordinary human. He wasn't a test subject turned into a high priest through countless experiments of the cult, but his vessel was already completed, from a very long time ago. The Apostle of Paradise could see it, his soul quietly shining within Sung Il-hwan's body, and the true size of his soul's vessel, which was hidden by the star pieces. The Apostle of Paradise's eyes widened in shock. And no way! What did you have inside you? How can a human? Sung Il-hwan chuckled at those words. A human, you say? You know nothing. Humans are a race that grows through hardship, and at the pinnacle of that is my son. And his grandson, of course. Just as he was about to utter those last words, bang! Kyuk! The tightly maintained balance of power suddenly wavered, and Sung Il-hwan's soul, which the Apostle of Paradise was trying to take as his vessel, began to bite back. Like a predator. What the? He's trying to devour me, a human soul. It was absurd, but the situation didn't give the Apostle of Paradise time to panic. Just then, a giant loomed over the vast dimensional gap. The shadow wyvern Kaisel appeared, roaring with its black wings spread. Father, I've evacuated everyone to safety. Cha-hae-in shouted from atop Kaisel, reassuring Sung Il-hwan. And she joined their battle without hesitation. Skill, sword of light skill, storm of white flames. A giant thunderbolt streaked down in a straight line, following the path of Cha-hae-in's sword. Flash, the blinding light cut through the dimensional gap and split the Apostle of Paradise in half. Chapter 296, Chapter 294. The Apostle of Paradise barely managed to avoid dying from Cha-hae-in's attack, but he wasn't unscathed. 1/3 of his torso, one arm from his shoulder to his waist, was completely severed, and then came lightning. Crackle! The severed part was scattered as ashes like black charcoal, showing how powerful the attack was. Of course, it didn't matter if this body was destroyed. He could always change it. But the problem was something else. Why is the ruler's power mixed with that woman's aura? The after effect was devastating. In the end, the Apostle of Paradise not only lost his severed body parts, but also suffered damage to his soul within. How can a mere human? A black shadow fell over the dumbfounded Apostle of Paradise. He gritted his teeth again as he saw it. The energy emanating from that shadow wyvern. That was definitely his power. He didn't know what was going on, but what he had to do here didn't change at all. He must escape from this place somehow. Mouth of the void. The Apostle of Paradise screamed his last cry, and he hurriedly moved his remaining arm to tear the surrounding dimensions haphazardly. Crack! 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 Vum! Dimensional holes were torn open here and there, and dimensional storms originating from those gaps began to intertwine and swirl. Whoosh! A terrifying hurricane swept through the dimensional gaps, striking Sung Il-hwan and Cha-hae-in. If you were caught in this storm, you would become dust in the universe and wander forever. In the meantime, whoosh! Sung Il-hwan skillfully dodged the dimensional storm and leaped upwards. His movements were smooth, as if he had been in this situation countless times. Thud. His feet lightly landed on the back of the shadow wyvern that Chahayan was riding. "Father, thank you, my dear daughter-in-law." Sung Il-wan smiled warmly, and with the daggers gleaming in both hands, he glared at the Apostle of Paradise, jumping in without hesitation. That figure, overlapping with Sung Jinwoo he once saw in outer space, completely destroyed the Apostles of Paradise will to fight. Sung Il-wan's daggers swung mercilessly, and powerful attacks spread in all directions. Slash, 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 qua! A scream erupted from the Apostle of Paradise. His fingers were severed joint by joint, his remaining arm was cut off, then his legs, and finally even his torso was mercilessly severed. A true dismemberment. And even his soul, hidden within that shabby body, was mercilessly slashed by Sung Il-wan's daggers. The Apostle of Paradise couldn't even scream anymore. In the dimensional gap, in the middle of this chaotic void, only the sound of flesh being torn and bones being crushed echoed. Crackle. Finally, his fragmented body began to crumble and scatter into the air. And then something amazing happened. Whoosh! The remains of the Apostle of Paradise, reduced to mere fragments, began to be sucked into Sung Il-wan's star pieces. Who watched the sight nonchalantly? Is it being absorbed? Sung Il-wan's wounded body began to regenerate, absorbing the energy. His cracked skin healed. His crushed bones reconnected from within. His body slowly returned to its original state. Like cracks in a broken ceramic being filled and mended, his condition, which was being eroded by the 23 star pieces, began to improve. I can rest easy for a while. Sung Il-wan let out a sigh of relief as the constant pain gradually subsided. I have to escape. Meanwhile, even in a situation where he was torn to shreds and only a handful of his soul remained, the Apostle of Paradise, tenacious like a weed, desperately searched for a way to survive. Whoosh! A jumbled dimensional storm, countless holes visible beyond the torn dimensional gap. Beyond that chaotic void, the Apostle of Paradise barely managed to find the energy of the flower pot he had planted. Swish! And he jumped in without hesitation. Whoosh! The dimensional wall rippled. I did it? The Apostle of Paradise, barely crossing the dimensional wall, rejoiced with relief. He had managed to tear through the dimensional wall and escape with all his remaining strength. And they couldn't follow him. It was only natural. The hole he just passed through was too small. It was too small for powerful beings like them to pass through. This actually meant that the Apostle of Paradise himself had become that weak. But what did it matter? The important thing was that he survived once again. I can just gather strength again. He was a fragment, split from the main body. He was weak now, but he could recover his strength by finding and merging with other fragments that came to this universe. Of course, it wasn't always a good thing. The process of finding those fragments one by one was cumbersome, and when they merged, the one with less power would have their ego devoured. He didn't like that fact. But since all those egos originated from one main body, it wasn't a big deal. Survival was the priority. But the real problem was the Shadow Monarch. Don't tell me we really lost the war? The Shadow Monarch won the war and returned here? He won the war against all those Itarim? Oh my God. It was a terrifying thought, but if that was the reality, his future held only inevitable death. He had never even imagined such a despairing perspective. Besides, why were there so many humans with the ruler's power on this planet? The Shadow Monarch's son, the Shadow Monarch's father, and what was with his wife? It was a truly abnormal family. But he was alive, so it was fine. I almost got completely devoured. Yes, he would be satisfied with that for now, and he looked around. This place, where he arrived after using his last ounce of strength to connect the dimensional coordinates, was the villain's city in China where he had prepared a base in advance. Just like in North Korea, his cherished flower pot was hidden in this land. Thud, the limp remains of his soul, appeared in China. But what's this? The problem was that the city reflected in the Apostle of Paradise's vision was quite different from what he remembered. It was already devastated, buildings had collapsed, and the streets were a sea of blood. Don't tell me this place was also discovered? An ominous feeling washed over him. No, what about the perception-impairing magic he cast? Why did things keep happening like this? Perhaps because of what he had experienced, the Apostle of Paradise immediately thought of the worst-case scenario. First of all, I don't feel the Shadow Monarch's presence. It was a relief. And then he couldn't see the Shadow Soldiers led by his son either. Then what is it? Who did this? Buzz, just then there was a noise from above. Looking up, he saw countless drones covering the sky. They were looking down at the entire land from high above through numerous camera lenses. What the? It was just absurd. Even if they were such crude objects, the perception-impairing magic was useless if they looked down from overhead like that. It was at that moment, grab! A strong hand suddenly appeared without warning and grabbed the Apostle of Paradise's soul from behind. Who are you? The Apostle of Paradise couldn't help but be bewildered. He felt a familiar energy from within the human who grabbed him. It was sudden, yet welcome. This is perfect. Even without any star pieces embedded, this human was also an excellent high priest-level vessel. And, human, a fragment of my soul is dwelling in your old body. Submit to me and offer that power. Crack! Huh? Before he could even finish his sentence, the old human, without hesitation, mercilessly bit into the Apostle of Paradise's soul. It wasn't a metaphor. He literally bit, tore, and began to chew and swallow. Gah, what are you doing? The remnants of his soul, already damaged, began to crumble and be destroyed in his mouth. That energy entered his body and was digested. Munch, munch, gulp. The old human's swallow wed the Apostle of Paradise whole. It was Liu Jigong, the 6-star hunter of China. He smacked his lips and muttered, a familiar taste. You don't tell me your ego. As he was being devoured in real time, the Apostle of Paradise finally realized that something was wrong. There was another one like Sung Jinwoo here, an absurdly vast soul vessel, and there was also an empty space within this old man where a ruler had once dwelled, and a fragment of his main body was sleeping peacefully in a corner of that vessel. Instead of taking over, he was losing his ego and having his power stolen. How can this be? Just what kind of unknown power was at work? This old man was also a being who could skillfully use the Apostle's power as his own. The Apostle of Paradise, who didn't even dream of the existence of the spring water of the echo forest that Suho discovered, was just confused. Just what are humans? Munch, munch, gulp. Even a random old human he encountered was like this. The Apostle of Paradise, who usually looked down on the human race, died a meaningless death, feeling disillusioned and terrified of humans. Whoosh, tsk. So he was an Apostle of Itarim after all, but his presence was too weak for that. Liu Jigong smacked his lips and tilted his head. He was too weak for an Apostle of Itarim, and the absorbed energy was too insignificant. He immediately took out his phone and contacted Sung Suho. Ah, yes, it's me, Liu Jigong. As you said, I persuaded our government, launched the drones, and found the villain's city. I'm currently searching for others besides this place, and I just happened to find and kill an Apostle of Itarim. Phones these days were amazing. With real-time translation, it was more convenient to communicate than meeting in person. Liu Jigong, as Suho requested, was finding and destroying all the flower pots hidden in China one by one. From Suho's perspective, it was a natural idea. China had illegally flown numerous drones and filmed him when he was in India. He judged that if they reused those cameras, it would be easy to find the Apostle of Paradise's flower pots from the sky. Of course, there was the troublesome process of persuading the Chinese government, but that was nothing for Liu Jigong. Of course, he, who had spent his entire life training, didn't have the negotiation skills to persuade politicians. But if he destroyed one important building, wouldn't that be more persuasive than some words? Ah, yes. You said you have a separate use for elvenwood? All right, then I'll just cut off the roots and pull it out separately. Liu Jigong glanced up at the tree as he talked to Suho. The elvenwood that was desperately resisting until just a moment ago was now eerily silent. It seemed like it stopped the moment he devoured the Apostle of Itarim, but it didn't matter. He was in the middle of summoning all the Chinese hunters with his outstanding political skills and annihilating the villains. Chapter 297, Chapter 295. Yes, then I'll leave you to that. Click. Suho put down his phone after finishing the call with Liu Jigong. Ding! The Apostle of Paradise has been defeated. Thanks to the system, he knew who the apostle of Itarim that Lujigang happened to find and kill was. It was quite a shame that he missed out on the experience points because he died far away, but if it was by Lujigang's hand, it was rather fortunate. If he absorbed the apostle of paradise, it would have significantly helped him, a national-level hunter, recover his former strength. To find and defeat the apostles of Itarim scattered across the globe one by one, it was obviously more effective to have many people helping than to fight alone. Especially if those who were once national-level hunters regained their former strength, they would be a tremendous force against the apostles. He was truly unlucky. Suho chuckled after hanging up the phone. The apostle of paradise, who fled while vowing revenge, died without his involvement less than a day later. There is no paradise for you to escape to. My liege, those words aren't used in this. Keek. Now that I think about it, it seems right. Beru, who was advising Suho, tilted his head for a moment and then nodded in admiration. There was indeed a paradise where the apostle of paradise ran away to, but not anymore. As expected of someone who majored in art, you even enjoy using poetic expressions now, such literary talent. Suho ignored Beru's incessant flattery, as always. Shaking off his lingering thoughts about the apostle of paradise, he turned his gaze to the pile of corpses he was sitting on, and the sight that unfolded there was hell itself. Fire and ice, the burning winter created by Suho and Circa. The corpses of high elves, piled up like mountains before that overwhelming disaster, filled his vision as far as the eye could see. Their state was too gruesome to simply be called a mess. Some were charred black, scattering to ashes, while others were frozen blue and shattered. There were even countless corpses so dismembered that he couldn't tell what they originally looked like. Thud! Just then, Greed's rough fist crushed the head of the last remaining high elf. Ding! Number of enemies to defeat, number of enemies defeated. The quest was finally over, and at the same time, the winter of the high elves, who betrayed their tribe and hid from the war, also ended. You have completed urgent quest, defeat the enemy. Level up! Ding! Quest reward has arrived. Before checking it, Suho first turned his gaze and looked at Circa's condition. Not yet? There was no answer. Circa had closed her eyes and was trapped in a giant ice pillar since some time ago. King of the Snowfolk and the Monarch of Frost explains that this is the result of trying to control too many spirits at once. In short, it was because Circa's vessel was insufficient to contain this much quantity of spirits. But Suho, having experienced this many times, immediately understood Silid's explanation and asked, "You're saying Circa isn't ready to become a monarch yet?" Rumble, as if responding to Suho's words, the ice pillar engulfing Circa's body was emitting a terrible chill even now. But Silad refuted Suho's question. King of the Snowfolk and the Monarch of Frost says that the vessel is already sufficient, so now we just have to wait until she completely masters the power she dominated. Wait? Until when? Silad remained silent at Suho's query. In the end, he didn't know either. Well, okay. Suho nodded and stretched, getting up from the pile of corpses. We can't wait here forever, so let's leave her and move on. That's an excellent idea. Let's place a guard here. Let's do that. As Beru said, Suho looked around to choose a shadow soldier to leave behind, and his eyes met Hasul's, who was looking at him with an awkward expression from afar. Ah, right. There was her. Suho had completely forgotten about Hasul's existence, engrossed in the battle, and she had been watching everything Suho did from beginning to end. That's why she couldn't say anything now. She couldn't do anything. She tried to help somehow at first, but that little shadow ant suddenly appeared and yelled at her to get lost because she was in the way, so she had retreated to this spot. And it didn't take her long to realize why she was an obstruction. At first, Hasul thought a large-scale war was about to break out. They were surrounded by a sudden army of thousands. She vaguely imagined Suho's summons breaking through the encirclement, fighting a defensive battle, and she would help from the side. But as the battle began, the reality that unfolded before Hasul's eyes was completely different from her imagination. It wasn't a war, just hunting. Yes, what happened here was just hunting, nothing more, nothing less. No matter how many prey flocked before a hunter, what was the problem? Nothing changed in the end. Rather, Suho simply hunted like a true hunter here, saying it was a good opportunity, and before that, Hasul had nothing to do but watch. What could she even do in the first place, even as an S-rank hunter? Hasul just stared blankly, taking in that overwhelming battle, that marvelous sight, one by one, and she reaffirmed it once again. A hunter is someone who hunts magical beasts. Thump. Hasul tapped her chest with her fist as she recalled the words Association President Woo Jinchul once said to her. The name Hunter had a special meaning to her. She became an S-rank awakened very early on, but she learned that fact very late. And because she immediately crossed over to North Korea after awakening, she missed the chance to become a hunter. Even if she had stayed, she probably wouldn't have been able to become a hunter in South Korea because of her past sins. She would have just become a villain and been imprisoned. She heard that even the S-rank villain Hwang Dong-soo was living in hiding somewhere, avoiding the association's pursuit. Hasul was sure that her future wouldn't be much different from that villain Hwang Dong-soo. And surprisingly, that actually led to the happy ending. The happy ending Hasul couldn't have had if she had stayed in South Korea. Therefore, the name Hunter was a lingering regret for the past that she missed despite being able to achieve, and a target of longing that she could only vaguely dream of. The more she learned about the lives of hunters from the villains who came to North Korea one by one, the stronger that emotion became. And then she met Association President Woo Jinchul. You're lucky. If this were South Korea, we would have had to fight. The association can't just leave an S-rank hunter who committed murder alone among the citizens. But this was North Korea, not South. Perhaps for that reason, Association President Woo Jinchul didn't become hostile towards Hasul as soon as he saw her. Rather, he cautiously approached her like he was dealing with a herbivore and suggested they travel together. It goes without saying that Hasul never let her guard down against him. It was only natural to be suspicious when a stranger suddenly approached offering a favor. And why was he trying to recruit her without even knowing anything about her? She was a villain wandering North Korea after all. But when she asked for the reason, Woo Jinchul adjusted his black sunglasses and grinned. Well, just because. I have good eyes. I've lived a tough life, so I'm quite good at reading people. Just because. What a ridiculous reason. Hasul felt absurd after hearing that empty answer with no persuasion. In her life, she escaped from an orphanage, and a rather harsh one at that, for her adults were synonymous with disaster. Woo Jinchul, an adult who nonchalantly shrugged and said he had lived a tough life in front of her, he was an obvious target for suspicion. Moreover, wasn't the name Woo Jinchul an infamous one she had heard countless times from the villains she met in North Korea? But, as if understanding Hasul's wariness, he just chuckled, hiding his sharp, hawk-like eyes with sunglasses, and he made Hasul a different offer. Well, it's okay, it's good to be cautious in this world. Then how about this? It's strategically disadvantageous for two S-rank hunters to move together in this vast land. I'll give you this walkie-talkie. Let's just exchange greetings with this from time to time, secretly. Secret friends? Cough. And no, not that suspicious expression. There are many other expressions that sound much better. How about a spy or an agent? Wasn't spy much more suspicious? Or was it? Woo Jinchul was flustered by Hasul's words, and seeing him surrounded by other hunters who were laughing and teasing him, Hasul's wariness subsided a little. That's right. How about this title? An unofficial hunter. Hunter. Yes, please become a hunter. Of course, you won't be able to work in South Korea due to circumstances, but the association will spare no support for an S-rank hunter. She couldn't even hear the rest. The important part was the beginning. To become a hunter, and since those words came directly from the association president himself, their weight felt even greater. Thus, Hasul became an unofficial hunter of the Korean Association and, as Woo Jinchul suggested, wandered around North Korea alone as she pleased, contacting him from time to time. Actually, she was already wandering North Korea, so nothing really changed in her daily life. But it was different. Having a sense of belonging in this desolate apocalypse gave her a much greater sense of relief than she expected. Especially for Hasul, who spent her adolescence in an orphanage after being abandoned by her parents. She escaped that hellish place on her own and gained true freedom, but ironically, The anxiety in her heart melted away as she felt a sense of belonging in a new place. And Wu Jinchul didn't ask Hustle to do anything, surprisingly, unlike the other adults who approached and stayed by Hustle's side. Faithful to his initial promise, Wu Jinchul just exchanged greetings with her occasionally. And now, gulp, a real hunter appeared before Hustle. Sung Suho, the S-rank hunter of Korea, who overwhelmingly showed her what a true hunter was, what being a hunter meant. After finishing all the hunting, he made eye contact with her and asked, "Oh, yeah, you were here, just like Wu Jinchul back then. Was your name Gusul?" "Hasul." "Yes, anyway." Wu Jinchul never spoke her name like that. He always used polite language, as if respecting her as an individual. "So Haniul, what are you going to do from now on?" "Hasul." "Anyway, what will you do? If you stay here, please protect Circa, and if you follow me, follow me." With that offer, Suho pointed towards the collapsed Alfheim and the scenery beyond and said to Hasul, "The Apostle of Paradise just died, and that's what happened." Hasul followed Suho's gaze, and an astonishing sight she hadn't seen before unfolded there. As the Apostle of Paradise died, the perception-impairing magic that hid his flower pots disappeared. North Korea, China, Russia, the numerous elvenwoods that were growing on this vast apocalyptic land were revealed to the world. As a result, everyone could now see those giant divine trees that were growing without anyone noticing. "I'm going to cut down all those trees and go to where Association President Wu Jinchul is. Will you follow me? Or you can just tell me the location. That's fine too." Chapter 298, Chapter 296. Meanwhile, "What's that?" exclaimed the hunters of the Korean Association who were wandering around North Korea hunting magical beasts. The same unreal scene unfolded before Association President Wu Jinchul. But despite the surprising situation, he calmly reported to the association and assessed the situation. And learning that this phenomenon was occurring worldwide, he nodded in a businesslike manner. More things to take care of. Beyond his black sunglasses, his hawk-like eyes gazed at the desolate land stretching endlessly before him. The alien trees that suddenly appeared amidst the blue mist and the echoing roars of magical beasts and spirits occasionally rampaging on the ground were an event that might require them to completely revise their plans. Trees we haven't seen before appeared on the path we already passed. Did they just appear now, or did we really miss them? S-rank hunter Choi Jong-in of the association approached Wu Jinchul and spoke. He observed the numerous trees soaring high into the sky with interest. Although it was quite surprising, it wasn't something to panic about. No matter what happened, his job wouldn't change. Flare, crimson flames flickered in Choi Jong-in's hand. Clenching the flames tightly, he pushed up his horn-rimmed glasses and grinned, revealing his teeth. "I vote for going back the way we came and burning them all." Association President Wu Jinchul pondered for a moment at the suggestion to retrace their steps. They had already been sweeping up magical beasts along the way, so the decision to go back just to burn those trees was a bit inefficient, because those alien trees existed not only on the path they passed, but also on the other side, the north side. In fact, there were more trees visible at the end of their current path. So in terms of efficiency, it would be much better to continue in their current direction, burning the trees and sweeping up magical beasts along the way. Then what was the problem? Actually, Wu Jinchul's gaze had been fixed on something particularly noticeable beyond the north. Is it just me, or are those trees strangely concentrated towards Russia? You're right. Choi Jong-in also nodded, following Wu Jinchul's gaze and checking beyond the Russian border. Beyond the distant blue mist, numerous alien trees that soared over Russia unfolded like a landscape painting. Could it be just his imagination that those suspicious alien plants seemed to originate from Russia? No way. Wu Jinchul muttered as he glared at Russia. Speaking of Russia, it's Yuri Orlov's country. Yuri Orlov? Are you talking about the prime minister who was elected 2 years ago? Yes, he's an S-rank with powerful barrier abilities. Choi Jong-in unconsciously observed Wu Jinchul's expression at his suggestive tone. From the side, he could see Wu Jinchul's eyes gleaming seriously behind his black sunglasses. Gulp. Seeing that gaze, Choi Jong-in couldn't help but swallow dryly. That expression again. Association President Wu Jinchul occasionally had that expression, a gaze that was nostalgic, as if reminiscing about the past, yet at the same time extremely rational and meticulous, as if planning the future with certainty. Although it was a bit strange to say this, Choi Jong-in felt a chill when he saw that expression. Sometimes he felt like his gaze wasn't on the reality before him, but on a completely different world. As if there was something beyond his gaze that ordinary people couldn't see. He had that expression when he first offered me a position at the association. For this country, for justice, to protect the world, will you become my colleague? 2 years ago, Woo Jinchul's eyes were like that when he politely handed him his business card after he awakened. Overwhelmed by that confident gaze, he couldn't help but accept the card. And from that day on, Choi Jong-in began working as the S-rank hunter, representing the Korean Hunter Association, earning the somewhat embarrassing nickname, the ultimate weapon of mankind. He was embarrassed when he was first called by such a childish nickname at his age, but at the same time, he devoted himself to the association with the determination to live up to that label. 2 years passed like that. But now, looking back on Association President Woo Jinchul's actions, which he observed from up close, he sometimes had this absurd thought. Could it be that the association president already knew that I would awaken as an S-rank? It was a truly ridiculous idea, but he couldn't help but think that Woo Jinchul might have actually known. Association President, are you thinking that Prime Minister Yuri Orlov might have been hiding those trees with his barrier ability? It's certainly possible. But the scale of the barrier is too enormous. Even though I know that there are differences in level even among S ranks, isn't there a limit? I can't burn that many trees at once with my ability. He might have received outside help, and especially Yuri Orlov's ability is optimized for being supported from outside. If there's enough magic power, he can easily cover an entire city with a barrier. Choi Jong-in had a puzzled expression at Woo Jinchul's confident tone. Not much information about Russia's new prime minister, Yuri Orlov, was publicly known. It was partly because Russia became a dangerous place after the cataclysm, but the closedness intensified since he became prime minister. Did you secretly plant a spy in Russia without my knowledge? No, at least not yet. But I know what kind of person Yuri Orlov was. Was? Past tense? Choi Jong-in tilted his head at the strange tone. Even less was known about Prime Minister Yuri Orlov's past. Have you ever met Yuri Orlov before? Well, I haven't met him directly, but I know one thing. No matter how old a person gets, their true nature doesn't change much. Good people age well, and bad people eventually age badly. Woo Jinchul adjusted his black sunglasses and smiled confidently. Of course, this is often a prejudice, but I trust that prejudice quite a bit. We have a social consensus to call that a boomer. Haha, is that so? Woo Jinchul chuckled as if he had been hurt by Choi Jong-in's joke. But what did it matter if he was a boomer? At least in the 2 lives he lived, prejudice was ultimately the result of collecting and analyzing untold amounts of data. Association President, we have a message. The secretary handed Woo Jinchul a walkie-talkie. It's from the Shadow of Paradise. Ah, that's good timing. Woo Jinchul gladly received the walkie-talkie as if he had been waiting. But the voice from the speaker wasn't Hasul's, but Sung Suho's. He listened attentively as Sung Suho explained the situation in detail and nodded. I see. Thank you for sharing. The Apostle of Paradise in Alfheim, Elvenwood and the High Elves, and the Apostle of Itarim. And Russia. Thanks to Suho, numerous pieces of information were piling up in Woo Jinchul's mind, forming a picture. Having organized his thoughts, he spoke to Suho in a serious tone through the walkie-talkie. Hunter Sung Suho, it seems like the repercussions of the Apostles of Paradise death will be much greater than expected. I agree. Suho also concurred in a serious voice from the other side. As he said, even as they were speaking, the Apostles of Paradise death was already causing tremendous repercussions worldwide. He had been creating and hiding his flower pots all over the world, and the moment the perception-impairing magic hiding those places disappeared with his death, whoosh! People around the world were shocked. What's that? What are those trees? Alien trees that soared as if to pierce the sky. In the eyes of people around the world, it looked like countless alien ecosystems had suddenly covered the earth. The size and scale were enormous, and the simultaneous appearance was enough to cause panic. And with China's numerous drone cameras and America's satellite images, all those scenes were broadcast worldwide. As a result, the whole world was thrown into chaos overnight. No, really, what are those? Where did those trees suddenly come from? Could it be a new type of dungeon break? Don't tell me gates are now appearing underground. Oh my god, that's terrifying. If gates appear underground, hunters can't stop them. It was an extremely unusual situation. It was natural for people to be shocked by the absurd scale of the situation. It wasn't a gate opening. It wasn't a dungeon break. And those trees didn't suddenly sprout from the ground. Alien trees that appeared naturally all over the earth, as if they had always been growing there. That absurdly large scale made the viewers feel a sense of tremendous pressure and strangeness at the same time. And that wasn't all. It didn't take long for the fact that not only strange plants, but also magical beasts, spirits, and even cities of villains hidden within those trees existed to be revealed to the world. This was a surprising situation for both those outside the barrier and those hiding inside, and it wasn't something anyone planned. Naturally, a fierce battle suddenly broke out between the two sides without any prior warning. This wasn't just happening in North Korea, Russia, and China. The Apostle of Paradise had been diligently increasing the number of flower pots everywhere, so there were also some in other countries. But people's reactions don't matter. At least for Wu Jinchul, who had experienced the near end of the world, it didn't matter how many elven woods appeared. They weren't rulers or monarchs, just a few trees. It was the hunter's job to take care of such things. So the fact that people around the world were shocked to see the appearance of elvenwood, which was revealed overnight, was meaningless information to Wu Jinchul. But at this moment, the most important problem that he was truly worried about was something else. The problem is that because of this situation, other apostles of Itarim will also realize that the Apostle of Paradise is dead. Yes, that's certain. There will be a response in some way, maybe even an all-out war. That's quite possible. As they conversed, Wu Jinchul was quite impressed by Suho's words, accurately grasping the core of the issue. In his early 20s, compared to him, who had lived 2 lives, the person on the other side of the walkie-talkie was still a very young man. But what did age matter? Wu Jinchul already knew him, the man who already saved the world alone at that age. In that sense, Hunter Sung Suho. Yes? And as he listened to the voice from the other side of the walkie-talkie, he realized once again that Sung Suho was his son. Especially since they were only talking without seeing each other like this, it felt like he was speaking directly to Sung Jinwoo. With that strange feeling, Wu Jinchul couldn't help but be excited about what kind of actions his son, Sung Suho, would take from now on. What are your plans from now on, Hunter Sung Suho? We'll decide our next steps according to your plan. Wu Jinchul agreed with Sung Suho. Because of this incident, all the apostles of Itarim scattered around the world would have realized that someone killed one of their kind. So, as Sung Suho said, there would definitely be a response from them one way or another. A sudden all-out war could break out, just like back then. Wu Jinchul couldn't help but swallow dryly as he recalled the tragedy he experienced a long time ago. The apocalypse always came suddenly, and Wu Jinchul had prepared for that moment, but he still couldn't help but feel uneasy, because Sung Jinwoo wasn't on Earth this time. But that's why he couldn't help but have even greater expectations for his son. And Sung Suho answered, "Let's join forces first. I'll be there soon." Rumble. Crash. Just then, Wu Jinchul saw giant trees falling in the distance, like dominoes. Ha! Wu Jinchul burst into laughter at the sight, and a plan suddenly came to mind. He made a suggestion to the walkie-talkie. Kai still held to his ear. "Hunter Sung Suho, would you be interested in going to Russia?" "Ah, isn't that illegal?" "Well, yes, it is. Of course, our association knows nothing about this." "Secret friends?" Wu Jinchul facepalmed at Hustle's voice that suddenly came from beside him. "Forget about secret somethings. There are other good expressions like an agent." Chapter 299, Chapter 297. The situation was unfolding exactly as Suho and Wu Jinchul predicted. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat. "Target acquired," a helicopter pilot shouted. A squadron of choppers carrying the French Special Forces was heading towards the area where Elvenwood was discovered. This is headquarters. Commence attack immediately. Understood? Swoosh, missiles were launched. They flew straight towards the giant tree and hit the trunk of Elvenwood. Kaboom! Direct hit. A part of Elvenwood exploded. After the Apostle of Paradise died, they no longer had the power to resist. It wouldn't have been like this originally. Elvenwood used to be the divine tree of the elves, a monstrous tree that raised and devoured elves throughout its long history. But the Elvenwood that sprouted on Earth was a little different. It was contaminated by the manna of the outer universe, a mutant sprouted by the Apostle of Paradise. When he died, the masterless, monstrous trees were completely lost, not knowing who to attack, raise, and devour. That was the result they were seeing now. Crash! Another hit! There's no response from the tree. Numerous fighter jets continued to attack the monstrous tree that suddenly appeared in France. The missiles they fired weren't ordinary. They were ordnance specially crafted with dungeon magic stones and magic crystals. These missiles were explosives capable of inflicting significant damage even on magical beasts. Of course, the production cost of each one was absurdly high. But look, it was worth investing that much money in research. Rumble. The sound of the monstrous tree collapsing from the explosions was as terrifying as the roar of a monster. The helicopter pilot, who came here with a tense face, finally breathed a sigh of relief. Ha! It was easier than I thought. But it was too early to relax. Danger! 12 o'clock! The helicopter pilot jerked the stick sharply. Hundreds of magical beasts suddenly emerged from the collapsed trees. They were the beings that were hiding inside Elvenwood. Crash! Winged magical beasts charged towards the helicopter. Thud! One crashed into the propeller. The helicopter lost its balance and shook. Damn it! Following that, numerous figures poured out from the ground and attacked them. They were the villains who were hiding in Elvenwood. Headquarters. This isn't just a simple tree, it's an enemy base. All units immediately commenced joint operations with the ground forces. The battle intensified. Elvenwood collapsed easily, but the beings hidden inside weren't pushovers. Similar things were happening all over the world. The United States. The USA mobilized strategic bombers to destroy Elvenwood, but the situation quickly turned into chaos due to the magical beasts and villains that emerged. The soldiers couldn't help but panic at the unexpected turn of events. Don't tell me we poked a beehive that was quietly hidden. It was a moment of self-doubt, wondering if they had done something reckless. But, kaboom! Suddenly, with a giant explosion, the magical beasts and villains pouring out of Elvenwood were swept away like by a wave. And, what nonsense! Of course, it's right to find and kill them all before the vermin multiply. The man who swept away all the enemies in the area with a single blow chuckled mischievously. The soldiers' eyes widened as they saw him. It's Thomas Andre. I heard he was arrested for murder. Why? Do you have a problem with that? A veteran with white hair. The muscular old man, his white hair like a lion's mane fluttering, stood with his giant fist raised, wearing shorts and sunglasses as if he was on vacation. We're saved! The surprise was short-lived, and sighs of relief erupted from the soldiers at Thomas Andre's appearance. Thomas Andre, his bulging muscles and the magic power blazing from his body, which would be terrifying if he was an enemy, were incredibly reassuring when he was on their side. Recently, he was a prisoner who was arrested by the Hunter Bureau for murdering Christopher Reed, an S-rank hunter of the United States. But for some reason, Thomas Andre, who should have been imprisoned, appeared with the hunters of the Bureau. Master, we've taken care of the other side as well. He even brought all his scavenger guild members. China. Although China was rapidly taking control of the situation under Liu Zhigang's leadership, they were struggling because there were more Elvenwoods than in other countries. The area was a super large field bordering North Korea and Russia, a giant apocalypse that they had already half given up on and left alone. But with the sudden appearance of Elvenwoods, they could no longer just watch. Thanks to the information coming in from all over the world, they learned that those trees were beehives. A den where countless villains and magical beasts were hiding was a ticking time bomb. They didn't know what would happen if they left it alone. Inside the Kremlin, Russia. As the military and hunters fought desperately against the elvenwoods that appeared all over the world. Interesting. Yuri Orlov was leisurely sitting in front of a monitor, watching the chaos. Everything he had hidden in the elvenwoods in various parts of the world was being revealed. The Apostle of Paradise, to think that weed-like bastard actually died. Looking at the situation, there was no need for him to check personally. The Apostle of Paradise was dead, and this was the result. Then the perception-impairing effect I placed on our country must have disappeared as well. This is quite troublesome. Yuri Orlov stroked his chin with a troubled expression. He didn't feel any sadness over the death of the Apostle of Paradise, who had been cooperating with him. Rather, he clicked his tongue, thinking he was a pathetic guy who died in vain in a foreign land after acting all high and mighty. Even though the elvenwoods he was growing in various parts of the world were suddenly revealed, the fruits harvested from those places were already Russia's assets. However, the future was the problem. If this happens, they will start to move as well. The Apostles of Itarim. Although he called them that for convenience, strictly speaking, they were Apostles of the Itarims. Since the gods they served were all different, they were also in a relationship of checking on and competing with each other, despite all being invaders of Earth. And from now on, they would inevitably flock to Russia, China, and North Korea, to seize the achievements he and the Apostle of Paradise had made, to take the fruits of the masterless elvenwoods. And, no, wait. A cold smile appeared on Yuri Orlov's lips as he pondered. The dead were dead, and shouldn't humans play with humans? Perhaps those from other countries had already realized that Russia was behind the Apostle of Paradise. Although it would be difficult to present evidence, after considering all possibilities, Yuri Orlov drained his red wine and got up. Clink. Since things have come to this, shall we make some new friends? Suho relentlessly moved forward. The masterless flower pots crumbled helplessly before his army. He uprooted all those trees and put them into the shadow dungeon. Keek, I can see your hands. Can't you work faster? We need to process the lumber quickly and send it to the Sea of the Afterlife. Beru went back and forth between the shadow dungeon and the real world, handing over the elven woods to the shadow dwarves, who cheered at the sudden influx of work. Gah! To think we would see so many of the legendary divine trees of the elves, which we never even glimpsed in our lives. Just who raised so many of these precious trees? Who was it? I think it was the Apostle of Paradise. Apostle of Paradise. What a talented guy. If he wasn't an otherworldly bastard, I would have captured him and made him plant trees for the rest of his life. The shadow dwarves smacked their lips, knowing that the Apostle of Paradise with such demonic talent was already dead. But it was only for a moment. What? Why are they still coming in? There's no end. There were this many elvenwoods. The shadow dwarves let out happy sighs at the endless supply of materials coming into the shadow dungeon, and they began to move their hands quickly under Beru's harsh whipping. Their longing for the Apostle of Paradise was long gone. They were already short-handed just by processing the trees he had already grown. Most of their fellow dwarves were already wandering the Sea of the Afterlife, leaving only a minimal number of workers in the shadow dungeon. Oh no! Master is cutting down trees, faster and faster! We can't fall behind! Just like that, the elvenwood logs they diligently processed were transformed one by one into keels for warships in the Sea of the Afterlife. And as soon as they were finished, Harmacon transferred them to the Sea of the Afterlife through the Hell Gate. What? What are these all of the sudden? Now it was the demons and dwarves in the Sea of the Afterlife who were surprised. Keels made of elvenwood, which they used to be grateful for even one, were endlessly coming in. The king of demons, the monarch of gluttony Essel, who was always on the ship with the best keel, quickly switched to the ship with a keel made of Alfheim, the largest and thickest among all the trees. Wah! The shadow dwarves who were with Essel were suddenly excited and began to expand the giant ship around Alfheim at a terrifying speed. The keel was the most important pillar of a ship. With this Alfheim, they would be able to build a warship far larger and stronger than they could ever imagine. Of course, a vessel wasn't completed with just a keel. They needed a tremendous amount of auxiliary materials to match the level of that foundation. But they were going to procure those locally, weren't they? Kayaha! Come as much as you want, you scraps of the afterlife. The weeds of the afterlife, who had been preying on the demons that entered the sea of the afterlife, were now being hunted. They were caught and turned into materials for Alfheim, Demon King's warship. And in a place no one knew, the legend began to spread through the sea of the afterlife. Chapter 300, Chapter 298. Meanwhile, deep within a lush jungle, in a massive greenhouse hidden in the depths of the dark forest, the one who was quietly curled up there opened his eyes. It seems he's dead. He instinctively felt it. The perception-impairing magic that had been concealing his hiding place suddenly disappeared. But it didn't matter. I've already bought enough time. Whoosh! He extended his curled wings fully, and the enormous wings, fluttering like a butterfly's, took up the entire ceiling of the greenhouse. He looked ahead. Thousands of pupae were hanging in this nursery, and the identity of the giant tree they were hanging from was none other than the elvenwood obtained through a deal with the Apostle of Paradise. But now, with his death, that tree had lost its purpose. So now, there's no reason for me to hide anymore. He flapped his wings towards the ceiling of the greenhouse, and the powder of light scattered, absorbed by the thousands of pupae. Rumble, the ceiling shattered. It was the moment when the giant greenhouse, which had been quietly hidden, was revealed to the world. At that time, somewhere in a deep valley covered in snow, in a giant laboratory located in a deep, dark cave, that fool finally died. Thousands of test tubes were buzzing with a red light. The owner and sole resident of this place clicked his tongue with a dissatisfied expression and muttered, "I knew he would eventually die because he was so foolish, but it didn't matter to him whether the Apostle of Paradise died or not. What he was truly dissatisfied with was something else, the achievements he left behind before dying. That sneaky bastard. How did he expand his territory this much in secret?" He glared at the numerous monitors installed before him, showing news broadcasts from around the world. All the reports, regardless of the country, were showing the achievements the Apostle of Paradise left behind before dying. From the perspective of an invader of Earth, that absurd amount of elvenwood was truly an achievement. That was why he was even more displeased. Was I falling behind without knowing? To that kind of guy. His pride was greatly hurt. Did he have a helper? A helper. Considering the insignificant abilities of the Apostle of Paradise, it was certainly possible. But what was the point of finding out? The Apostle of Paradise was already dead, and there was no way to confirm it now. There was no value in confirming it. His only interest here was one thing, the legacy he left behind, to quickly recover the nutrients gathered in those numerous masterless flower pots. Annoying. His mouth watered. Contrary to his furrowed brows, his lips were sincerely curling up. It was truly a blow to his pride that the legacy left by the guy he usually ignored was greater than expected. But at the same time, it was obvious that his power would grow if he inherited that vast legacy, and he had to hurry before others snatched it away. If he knew about this, it meant others did too. I should get a little more before that. He got up with sinister eyes. A black wave. A giant black wave was swelling along the mountain range. That surge toppled the elvenwoods it encountered one by one, swallowing them whole, and continued to advance. It was as if countless black ants were devouring everything in their path. But its true identity was the shadow army led by Suho. "My liege, I see the association's flag," Beru shouted from the sky. The flag of the Korean Hunter Association was fluttering in the distance. Suho stopped and looked at the association's camp. He could feel Association President Woo Jin-chul's gaze as he stood in the center, looking in this direction. They were finally meeting. "Let's go." Beru's eyes instantly changed at Suho's single word. The dignity of a unit commander enveloped his small body. "Follow me." The shadow army moved in unison. The black wave flowed along the mountain range. It was an overwhelming sight. Finally, Woo Jin-chul was lost in the aught as he watched the shadow army approaching from afar. An old memory surfaced. It was like this back then. The moment when the world almost ended, the day of the apocalypse when he thought everything was over. He was there that day. leading thousands of shadow soldiers just like this, and powerful enemies were forced to kneel before him. Even powerful beings from other dimensions were nothing but prey before his shadow. Looking back, it was the most despairing yet hopeful moment. The war against the monarchs, a miracle brought about by one man in a war that seemed impossible to win. Association President. Pause. Suho had arrived before Woo Jinchul, but he couldn't break free from his thoughts for a while. He couldn't help it. The young man standing before him resembled him too much. His gait, his gaze, even the way he led the Shadow Army. Suho greeted him politely. Nice to meet you. I feel like it's not the first time. Woo Jinchul's voice was filled with emotion, and his gaze subtly shifted to Beru, who was beside Suho, and he bowed deeply to him. Mr. Beru, it's been a while. Beru? Suho looked up at Beru in confusion. Beru had swelled up and become huge beside Suho, black steam blazing from his entire body. Sung Jinwoo's closest aide, in the form of an ant, was looking down at Woo Jinchul with narrowed eyes. Gulp. Seeing that, Woo Jinchul couldn't help but swallow dryly, and he instinctively remembered the Jeju Island disaster that he could never forget, even after all this time. The disaster-class magical beast that mercilessly slaughtered the outstanding S-rank hunters gathered there was standing before him now. Unfortunately, Sung Jinwoo wasn't here, but with Beru alone, this earth was safe. Beru. Keek? You said you had to conserve magic power. Understood. Mini Beru suddenly appeared at Suho's single word. Woo Jinchul's eyes widened. He wasn't a fool. Rather, he was too smart for his own good. Smart enough to glean a considerable amount of information from that short conversation. Don't tell me. Beru's power? What a disrespectful gaze. A brief silence fell. At this moment, one hope for Earth disappeared, at least in Woo Jinchul's mind. Then it's Plan B. The only hope left is Hunter Sung Suho himself. Woo Jinchul immediately shook off his disappointment and introduced his companion to Suho. This is Hunter Choi Jong-in. Brief greetings were exchanged, and Woo Jinchul immediately brought up the thing he asked Suho to do through the walkie-talkie. First of all, could you restore Hunter Choi Jong-in's memories? It seems like we need to do that before we can continue our conversation. All right. As Suho took out the shadow key without a word, Choi Jong-in looked at Woo Jinchul in confusion. Did I get amnesia or something? He couldn't help but be bewildered. But at Woo Jinchul's unwavering gaze, Choi Jong-in shrugged and approached Suho. The shadow key touched his forehead, and at that moment, Choi Jong-in's expression began to change rapidly. Memories flooded in like a torrent. Gates, hunters, the confusion when the first awakened appeared. The moment he established the Hunters Guild. The days when he struggled to survive the competition with large guilds. The moment when the Hunters Guild rose to become the best guild in South Korea. Battles in S-rank dungeons. Struggles against unknown beings in the gates. Countless moments with his colleagues. All of that was revived in an instant. What are these memories? Choi Jong-in had a shocked expression, as if he had been hit on the back of his head. Numerous memories, unfamiliar yet familiar, flashed through his mind like a movie, a panorama. 2 lives, 2 awakenings. The lives of the 2 Choi Jong-in overlapped and merged into one in an instant. Ha! Choi Jong-in's eyes were different now. A depth he didn't have before was added to his gaze. There was no need for further explanation. All his questions were answered at once. Even the fact that his meeting with Woo Jinchul before awakening wasn't a coincidence was confirmed. Choi Jong-in's serious gaze fell on Woo Jinchul. Association President? Did you remember all this? Woo Jinchul silently nodded. Since when? Long before I went to see you, Hunter Choi Jong-in. Ah, so that's why. Only then did he understand everything, and sighed. That heavy burden, all alone. You're not alone anymore. Choi Jong-in clenched his fist with a determined expression at Woo Jinchul's words. Now he knew what he had to do. It seems like there's no need for the Hunters Guild in this world. The association is taking its place. The goal is the same, no matter who builds what. In the past, the Hunters Guild was the best large guild in South Korea, and Choi Jong-in was its leader. But this time, it would be different. They needed a force to protect the world, not just a for-profit organization. And since Choi Jong-in knew everything Woo Jinchul had done since the beginning of the association, he realized that Woo Jinchul had already thoroughly prepared everything that could be done with human strength. even at this moment. In that sense, Woo Jinchul spoke to Suho. I'll tell you about the things we've been doing.